Okay, so next topic is we get into some training stuff. And the next topic is something I've been giving thought to for some time now. And I actually do have a debate about this coming up with Menno. We'll see if he can embarrass me live. It'd be sweet. I'm going to start crying and shit and run off. And it's going to be pretty cool. There are some extreme views on this. And I'm hoping to kind of, maybe not close the gap, but introduce some ideas as to why the biggest and best of the bros, that is, IFBB pro bodybuilders, tend to do things a little bit differently than the evidence-based community would have recommended, because the evidence-based community is primarily composed of a different population of individuals on average. Especially, when we talk about evidence-based, the individuals that are studied by science are, for the most part, what? What demographic do most exercise science studies cover? So first of all, disease populations is definitely one. The one that is healthy is untrained undergraduate physical education students. Basically, first-time gym goer. Unfortunately, you cannot conclude very much from those individuals that you can have a lot of external validity with to IFBB professionals. One of the most ignorant and anti-scientific things you can do is cite a bunch of studies on basically untrained physical education students as they see, Ronnie Coleman, you're doing things wrong. The science says, well, if you've ever been trained formally in science instead of trained on PubMed, which means you have no friends. I don't either, so I'm on there all the time. But I do have science training. You're familiar with the concept of external validity, which means that studies who are internally valid can come to the conclusions they can come to within their own study design based on the population they actually study. External validity asks, how can we take the results of the study and actually apply it to other populations outside of the actual sample size that we looked at? And external validity tends to drop the further we get to the population studied. So if you have a study on protein intake with African-American diabetic women aged 55 to 65, and you're like, see, everyone should be eating half a gram per pound or something, it's going to be very confusing and very inappropriate to apply that directly towards, Asian Pacific Islander men in their mid-20s or something like that, right? So a lot of the problem that arises, when we have sort of kind of disagreements in the evidence-based community versus the sort of bro community, and I think comes down to external validity and use of studies, and the fact that evidence-based lifters, it's a kind of a new thing, and most evidence-based lifters, basically because evidence-based approach isn't that old, are themselves individuals that haven't been training for a really long time, have not accrued a ton of muscle yet, but well on their way and are going to start discovering some of these things apply a bit differently than we thought. Training frequency over the career span is one of them. So here we go. How many of you guys are familiar with, to some extent, with my volume landmarks situation? Okay, sweet. So point one says MEV is just above MV for beginners, close to MRV for ultra advanced. I'm supposed to draw out this implication. Well, I have a drawing device, so I'll just use my hands. Basically, MEV is minimum effective volume, the smallest amount of training volume you can do and still experience noticeable muscle growth in this example. Okay, MV is maintenance volume, that's the amount of training, the volume of training that you need to do to maintain your gains. And then MRV is the maximum recoverable volume, the most volume you can actually recover from, and anything above that is overreaching and overtraining if you do it long enough. So for beginner individuals, for pretty untrained individuals, the minimum effective volume is literally right above the maintenance volume. Let me ask you a really cool brain teaser question. What is the maintenance volume for an untrained individual? How many sets per week? 0 sets per week. That means they will grow from 1 set per week. Their MEV is 1 set per week. How many of you guys here can get results from 1 set per week? Raise your hand. We're done with that shit. Because even though some of us might be closer to the beginner side of the spectrum, no one here is that much of a beginner. So at the very beginning, the MEV is just above the maintenance volume. The minimum effective volume is just above the maintenance volume for beginners. And this is true for probably a couple of years of training because the maintenance volume and minimum effective volume rise together for a while. So when you get to have trained about 2 or 3 years, your minimum effective volume, your maintenance volume may be like 8 sets per body part per week, and your minimum effective volume might be like 9 or 10 sets of body part per week. Right above your maintenance volume, whatever's not maintenance, just higher than that, is going to be minimum effective volume. The problem is that as you get more and more advanced, it becomes relatively easier to conserve your muscular gains. You guys know about the myonuclear domain and migration of satellite cells, that once you've built muscle, it doesn't just go away, and it's actually very easy to maintain muscle. Advanced athletes hold on to fitness gains better in actually almost every measurable fitness gain, not just muscle mass, than beginners do. So if you train someone for 2 or 3 months and then you stop, they shit away all their gains within a couple of weeks. This is back to having never lifted weights. If you train someone for 2 or 3 years and then stop, just a couple of months of training later will bring them back to their all-time best really quickly. So it turns out that this probably applies to volumes, which means if you are an advanced lifter, it could very well be that your maintenance volume could be about 8 sets per body part per week. But your minimum effective volume might be 16 sets. So what the hell do you get if you do 12 sets per week? Basically, you're doing more volume, but you're still just maintaining. Because when you're advanced, your physiology has a big resistance to adaptation. It doesn't tend to improve unless you give it a really good reason to do so. And the way that that kind of unfolds in the volume concepts is that you have to get really close to your maximum recoverable volume to even start to see gains in advanced individuals. That kind of sucks, the first thing. The good news is that when you're super advanced and you want a low volume phase just to take a break from training, you don't have to do much to keep your gains. The bad news is that where you start your mesocycles has to be pretty high up. And you're going to have to cause one heck of a homeostatic disruption just to get any gains at all. This idea that you can progress super easily through easy weights and stuff works really well for beginners, pretty well for intermediates. But for advanced individuals, okay, your minimum effective volume is going to be pretty close to your maximum recoverable volume, which means that we're going to have to try to restructure training from the normal, easy, slow progressions to some extent, because our progression window is not very big. Does that make sense? We don't have a lot of room to rise up in volumes and in intensities. Yeah.
So what about if you're talking about someone that's trained for a long time, has advanced, stopped training, and they've got a lot of additional satellite cells kicked in? Does that same rule apply with regards to they can gain with very little volume because they get beginner gains again, but will they keep holding their mass easier because of the satellite cell proliferation?
Both.
So it's sort of best of both worlds.
Yeah. The best gains you'll ever see in your life is if you train for 15 years, stop for a year, and then start again. It's magic. Within 2 months, you're going to be as big as you ever were. It's really nonsense. Which is fucking bullshit because a lot of supplement companies, especially back in the 90s, would take bodybuilders that had an injury or a really long break away from training, and they would be like, oh, look, with Cell Tech, Lee Priest managed to gain 18 kilos of muscle and lose 15 kilos of fat. First of all, it's not just Cell Tech. And second of all, yeah, the motherfucker didn't do anything for 3 months, and then all of a sudden, Shazam. That's when you get to see people say, I grew into a show. You guys ever see that with bodybuilding? There's 2 ways to grow into a show, which to most of us drug-free people seems like complete insanity. One is you don't train very hard in the off-season. You guys familiar with Kevin Lavroni, with his story? He would prep for the Olympia for 4, maybe 6 months if he was feeling really, really spunky. And then the rest of the time he would just go on tour with his band, drink heavily, and probably have a lot of sex. And it's a sweet life. He's a man. So he's just in a rock band, and he just didn't train for more than half the year. So he would start weighing 100 kilos, his weight would drop to 100 kilos, 95 kilos. And when he'd start prepping for Olympia, he'd get back on all the drugs. He was completely drug-free during that time. And he'd get back on a shitload of drugs, start eating food again, start to train again, and he would gain up to 110 and lose body fat at the same time. But if you try to replicate that, not having skipped half a year of training, be stupid. And people use his example as oh, well, maybe we should all be doing that. How many Olympias did he win? You guys think Dorian Yates or Ronnie Coleman took fucking 6 months off? No, they kept that man out of probably 10 Olympia titles. So don't not train half the year. That's not a good idea. Yes, question.
Always taken years off now, so a longer off season, more drugs quickly than this time.
Is Kevin LeBron going to win this time? Yeah. Some people do that. Someone I was talking to was like doing Olympia predictions. They're like, "Yeah, LeBron, man, he's coming back," and I'm just like, "All right, fucking 100 years old. You're out of your fucking mind." He's gonna look sweet. He always does. Flex Wheeler, I think, might be doing Olympia this year too. That's cool. Yeah. Hopefully the symbol's leaked out. Anyway, we're just talking shit at this point. All right. So that's point one. So notice that this starts to give us some ideas about maybe frequency might need to be different, because what's the implication here that if the minimum effective volume is really close to MRV for these advanced folks, they might need to have really big ass workouts to do anything, and then maybe the frequency needs to change. Maybe, but we've got some other ideas. Point number two. Beginners recover very quickly from any particular overloading session. Ultra advanced recover more slowly. For people who are very big and strong to read research on high frequency training that says it's better to train this way is at some point just fucking comical. Because you'll look at the study and these guys will like do 4 sets of squats, 4 sets of leg presses, 4 times a week and make gains. If I tried that shit, I would blow my quads on workout number 4 and just right the fuck off my body. They'd be like, zip, you just like zip right out. I don't know what the fuck would happen. I would have DOMs the entire time that the study was occurring for 8 weeks, and I would go into my neurons would stop working. Something fucking terrible would happen. It's inconceivable. When you get really, really big and really strong, things fuck you up a ton. And it is a non-linear scale. It is an exponential scale. When you squat 100 kilos for 5x5, it's going to take you some amount of time and some body system sort of energy to recover. If you squat 200 kilos for 5x5, it doesn't just scale up by double. It scales up maybe by triple or 4 times. How many of you guys have known anyone in person to do 300 kilos for 5x5? What's a typical 100 kilos for 5x5? What would someone do next week if they were doing that? They would do 102.5 5x5, right? The week after that, they do 105. Do you guys know anyone who does a workout like, 5x5 at 400 kilos this week, next week 402.5, 5x5? You do 5x5 at 400 kilos? Make that maybe like 3 weeks to completely recover. You need a taper from that shit. That's like getting hit by a car. It scales non-linearly. So beginners recover super, super quick, and ultra advanced recover much more slowly. Something you can use in your own body to intuit that, experience it yourself. If it's a little alien to you, think of body part sizes and how quickly they recover. So how many of you guys have had sore legs regularly for like 3 to 5 days? Quads. Fuck yeah. What about biceps? Your rear delt ever gets sore for 4 days? If mine did, I go to the hospital. Like, something's fucking wrong. Something back there is wrong. Something died in there. I don't know what happened. Right? You just can't get muscles that disrupted that are very small. And if all of your muscles are small, if you're a beginner, you recover super fast. Right? The ultimate example of that is drug-free, mostly untrained, small females. Okay? And one of the most comical and kind of sad examples is, especially when I work at the university, every now and again, students will come see me and be like, "Can you look at my workout plan and tell me if it's good or bad?" And a lot of females, how do they get their workout plans? Still, unfortunately. Instagram, of course. Fuck, I didn't even think about that one. So now there's 2 ways. Instagram, whatever, Glute Girl 5000, Mega 4, Ultra Slut 50 or whatever. So use everything. You guys ever see that video where like every machine is a bikini girl's glute machine? Like, it doesn't matter what it is, we'll turn into glute machine. Like, stand on chest press and press backwards. So there's that way, which is also not great. But another one is like my boyfriend or my older brother or this one huge guy at the gym. I just do their workouts with them, which means I do every body part once a week. A bikini girl, what would she have to do to her pectoralis major to necessitate 1 week of recovery? Car accident. To the pecs. Just stand right here in traffic, just like this. Fine. Okay, fine, great. Thanks for the disruption. So, for females and stuff, I mean, you literally, and this occurs intra-workout as well. How many of you guys have coached clients before, do personal training? You have like this fucking housewife, right, who's tiny, weighs like 50 kilos. You go, "Oh my God, I'm gonna fuck her up. Watch this." High bar squats, then lunges, then leg presses. And there's a workout that you've done before, which you're like crippled. You like can't even make it out of the gym. You have to crawl and beg for help. She does like her first set of squats, and she's like, "That was hard." And you're like, The blood should be coming out of her mouth now. Nope. Another set. And then 15 sets later, she's like, that was great. And you're like, okay. She walks out of the gym. She comes back 2 days later. She's like, I feel a little sore, but I'm healed. And you're like, how the fuck? Right? Yeah, but when you use like 25 kilos for your shit, you just don't get that fucked up, right? And if you have a bodybuilder that weighs 100 kilos, that's super fucking strong, and tries to do like a squat every day program, he's gonna squat his fucking knees off his body, right? Healing takes longer, disproportionately longer for ultra advanced. So even if it is beneficial to have high levels of overload, frequent spikes of overload, it's just something we just can't do. It's like, is it awesome to be rich and have a shitload of money to spend? Yes. But how much cool shit can you do? Because doing some cool shit means you're not doing other. Like, unless you can play casino slots on a yacht while getting a blowjob, there's some shit you just can't do. Did I just invent the coolest fucking thing ever? Forget fucking buying a Rolex. I got this yacht that gives you head, and it's a casino. What else do rich people like to do? It smokes a cigar for you, so you can say you've been around cigar smoke, but you don't have to have the negative benefits of actually smoking one. I don't even know. Aren't we in a fucking casino hotel right now? I saw a guide to gin room. Gin Palace. What the fuck is a gin palace? There's a room here called the Gin Palace. Steve, why are we not there? What is a gin palace? I thought that was like the lowest rung of like, your life sucks and that's all you have left is gin. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So even if you hypothetically could benefit from frequent pulsatile overloads every day, you can't recover from that if you're big and strong enough. Okay? And if you're advancing your career, you're going to be bigger and stronger. Does that make sense? So even if it was a benefit, it's just not in the cards for you. Number 3. Yes, question.
Increased frequency or low intensity away or
Low intensity or low per session volume? Which one?
I mean, I'm open for suggestions. But yeah, kind of.
It certainly is a way to make that possible. Lower intensity is not super viable because intensity correlates with results, so you're taking away results. Low per session volume might be a thing. So instead of doing 5 sets of squats 3 days a week, maybe able to do 2 sets of squats every day. Maybe. And that could be a good idea, but point 3 is designed to counter that idea to some extent. So beginners do not require a lot of homeostatic disruption to grow. As a matter of fact, there is a group of studies I like to cite to people who get too out of hand where it's shown that endurance training results in similar muscle growth to resistance training in the untrained. Yes, you heard that correctly. Jogging will get you as big of legs in the first 3 months of training as squatting, as the best squatting program you can think of. How the fuck does that work? Well, the level of homeostatic disruption for jogging is minimal, but it's super fucking high if you've never done anything before. You will use all of your fibers, they will all get damaged, they will all grow. But after 3 months, that shit doesn't do anything, and you're not going to grow big legs with a marathon program. That's for damn sure. So the homeostatic disruption required of beginners is very low. Very likely, the homeostatic disruption, even per session, of advanced has a minimum threshold below which adaptations do not seem to occur readily. So you see people on Instagram, IFB pros, having workouts like train chest today, and it's like 20 sets per workout. And you're like, fuck, why is that necessary? It may be that just shy of that, their chests no longer grow from anything that is not that big of an emergency stimulus. But it is non-controversial in biology that if you do not disrupt something away from its normal homeostatic parameters, adaptations simply do not occur. Okay? Adaptations in evolutionary biology are a need to adapt basis. If you're not disrupting a system, it has no reason to expend energy to get any better. I've had this debate with other people in the industry that I respect greatly, and I think I'm very correct, and I think they're very incorrect in this. Right? And people say you don't need homeostatic disruption to get bigger. How the fuck does that work? So you just like some magic weird shit and you get bigger? I'm not really sure how that works at all. To me, my examination of the evidence, both formal and informal, is that you need a high level of homeostatic disruption to grow, and the higher the level comes with the higher the athlete, right? So if you want someone, the strength is a really easy one to use here. If someone is going to squat 400 kilos and they want to raise their squatting ability to 420 kilos, how much do they have to fuck up their bodies to do that? The most. What if they were squatting currently 75 kilos and they want to go work up to 100 kilos? How much do you have to disrupt? Probably not much, right? It's just you don't have to send that big of a message, so it's not as big of a deal. So the homeostatic disruption required to grow beginners in general probably isn't that high. As a matter of fact, it's a huge mistake. How many of you guys have seen people start weight training programs? They're like, I'm doing 5x10 of everything. Fuck yeah, they get super sore. They get burnt out like the first 2 weeks. They're like, what the fuck? I like feel like I'm in a car accident all the time. That's stupid. Beginners, it's super easy to grow. You just tell people, look, you're a beginner. Just do fucking 2 sets of everything 3 times a week. Fucking just 1 set of everything 3 times a week, you're going to get huge gains, right? For ultra advanced, you're really going to tell someone that like 1 set per week is going to get them jacked? No way. They got to thrash their shit in order to make the kind of gains remotely that they used to. So there's something to be said for that. Practical consideration for training frequency is that beginners have a very short warm-up because they're not lifting really heavy weights, and they have a short warm-up because they have few or no nagging injuries. Ultra advanced have a long warm-up typically because they're bigger and stronger and plenty of nagging injuries, which means they can't handle high frequency programs because the nagging injuries take like a week to heal. And so every time a huge IFBB pro trains his chest, he gets tendonitis. How many people who just start training get tendonitis? They don't. They don't fucking have tendonitis. They don't have 25 years of fucking up the tendons under their belt. But IFBB pro, if he's going to train chest, he's going to fuck his shit up so bad it's going to take a week for all that stuff to heal because he has nagging injuries. And there's only one option: train the chest hard and get the nagging injuries back. Or option 2 is not an option, which is train not hard and not get any growth or any nagging injuries, right? People say, why don't you just back off? Well, back off means I don't grow anymore. So that's the way it's going to happen, right? The short warm-up, why is that pertinent to training frequency as a practical consideration? If you have to have a long warm-up, why is training frequency all of a sudden pertinent? What do you guys think? Where am I leading to? What kind of body part split am I leading to with this warm-up mention? Say what?
Upper, lower, or full body?
Something like that, yeah. So people talk about full body routines are the best way to grow. It takes me personally, for good squat weights, 30 to 45 minutes to warm up for the squat. It takes me 20 minutes to warm up for the bench. It takes me 45 minutes to warm up for the deadlift. It takes me 15 minutes to warm up for pull-ups. The fuck am I going to do a full body routine? I'm going to be warming up 90% of my life. Because I said, okay, I train full body every day, 6 days a week. That means how much am I warming up? If we add all that shit up, that's an hour and a half of warm up per fucking workout. Out of your fucking mind? I'm out. That's all I have for the gym anyway, right? How come body part splits are dominant in this regard? Well, it might take you 20 or 30 minutes to warm up your chest, but you keep hammering chest, shoulders, triceps, related muscle groups, everything's already warm. So your total warm-up time per week falls considerably versus if you do a whole body workout. Does that make sense? But if you put one of your mostly untrained clients through full body, what do they need to warm up for squats? They fucking go on the treadmill for 5 minutes, and then they do 1 set of squats with the bar, and then you put the working weight on, they're fucking ready to go. They need to potentiate any of that shit, right? People ask, like, does strength keep you from getting injured when you're playing sports? Yes. But when you're lifting weights, the stronger you are, the more likely you are to get injured. You guys ever see someone get hurt squatting like 80 kilos? Like, this shit is hard to do. You gotta really fuck it up to get 80 kilos to fuck you up. But you walk 280 kilos out of the rack, you're surprised if you don't get hurt. You're like, oh, all right, it's a good day. I didn't blow up. That's sweet, right? So it's one of those situations where because you have to warm up body part specific for optimal safety, when you're a beginner, you can get away with high frequency training because your warm-up isn't detrimentally long. Does that make sense? But as you become more advanced, even if high frequencies on a pure technical level are better for hypertrophy, they simply become untenable. So unless you're an IFBB pro and you have all day to train, there are other points 1 through 3 kind of say maybe even that's not a good idea, but high frequency just wouldn't work potentially because you would either not warm up sufficiently to be safe, or you would have to go very low intensity, which wouldn't be optimal, or your warm-up takes fucking half of your workout. That makes sense? So if you like do squat, you guys ever do a program at squat, bench, and deadlift in the same day? Fuck. It's doable, but you're in the world. One of my roommates does a program similar to that. He'll do 2 of the main lifts, but he just squatted 800 for the first time in just knee wraps. So his workouts take 3.5 hours. He's there all the fucking time. That sucks. And he's not training for hypertrophy. He's training for powerlifting, and he's a very good responder to low volumes. So that's a low volume workout that takes 3.5 hours. You guys can conceive of what an IFBB pro's full body workout would look like. It'd be comical. It'd be like, 6 hours, I'm still here. I don't know why.
And do you think the IFB pros are trying to more but they're obviously trying to train certain muscle groups more than others. Obviously, because they've got so much mass, they're trying to cause more hypertrophy. They're not trying to just systemically grow.
Not all the time, for sure. So they'd be, well, I guess we could phrase it as they would be entering specialization phases more often.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And would that then affect, like, so certain things they are very close to pushing too close to the MRV?
Totally. And they should be anyway. Absolutely. Yeah. So with more advanced individuals, it's just a good independent point to make in general. More advanced individuals will tend to grow parts of their body at a time versus grow the whole body at a time. Right? Like, ask a beginner what like muscles they want to grow. If their correct answer should be everything. Right? It is always funny to me when people at the gym, like I've had people at the gym come up to me before a very well meeting. I shouldn't be making fun of them, but here I go anyway. They'll come up to me at the gym, and this is, I train like mostly with undergrads, right? Because I'm a professor, and like some guys come up to me, the motherfucker weighs like 50 kilos, right? Because you go, I want like more inner chest. I'm like, chest, what chest? Where's the chest? First you build the chest, then we make an inner chest for you, okay? An inner chest. Like, just imagine that guy's life. He like walks into the gym. He now weighs 52 kilos. And so IFB pros like curling in the corner. Some guy looks like that, and he's like, oh man, that guy's got a fucking sweet inner chest. He must have his shit all figured out. And then he's asking me for tips, and he's like, hey man, here's my super hot girlfriend. Please take her with you. You're the man. Inner chest. No one ever says outer chest. You guys notice that? Yeah. And people always ask, like, how do I grow my the teardrop? But no one asks about the vastus lateralis for some reason. It's always the teardrop, bro. How do I get my teardrop going? Some guy asked me that recently. I was like, fuck? I had to think about it. Oh, quads. You guys know what my answer was? I don't fucking know. I honestly don't. I have no idea. All the literature I've looked at with foot position and stuff, you guys ever look at that literature, foot position, squat, leg press, and what grows what? It's like almost completely equivocal. But again, it's on untrained people, so who the fuck knows, right? So basically, I don't know, like, if you have big, rainy sized legs, then you should be asking that question. But like, usually I'll just click on the guy's profile and be like, motherfucker, just grow your legs. Jesus Christ. Anyway. Point against super low frequencies for beginners is that if you subject beginners to really high single session volumes, you basically exceed their per session MRV. You cause violent, highly disruptive delayed onset muscle soreness, which has been shown and is fully theoretically expected to cause less hypertrophy than otherwise would. When we talk about causing disruption, homeostatic disruption, which leads to delayed onset muscle soreness, which is another talk we have later today, the middle ground is almost certainly the best place. It's not like the more damage you can do, the better. That's nonsense, because after a while, your body just has to recover and can't even allot to growth. There is such a thing as too much damage. So one big problem that I notice, and I've always kind of been keen on this, is when you have beginners that are training, like with the body part bro split, okay, chest on Monday and then not chest for another couple of days, or chest until next Monday. How much do they have to fuck up their chest to maintain fraction synthetic muscle rate curves for a week? Well, that amount is equated to so much muscle damage that they're barely even going to grow. It's just like getting into a car accident every week, more or less. Whereas somebody who's bigger and has more muscle, they might be able to have longer curves, potentially, without as much damage, maybe. Or even if they have as much damage, at least for them it's a necessity. So if you are smaller, why train super infrequently if you can't even tolerate that kind of volume? Someone who has minimum effective volume, or maybe a maximum adaptive volume of 20 sets per body part per week, they can do a 12-set workout and get awesome right middle of the line kind of growth. For someone who's unused to training at all, a 12-set workout will maybe cause muscle loss. You get fucking rhabdomyolysis from 12 sets if you've never trained before, right? So these high single session volumes that advanced people might be good or at least okay for, they're inappropriate for beginners, right? Because beginners have such a low tolerance, poor tolerance to damage, that they have to have little pitter-patter sessions. Here's the advantage beginners have. They recover really quickly, right? But they can't handle a lot of volume at any one time. So for them, high frequencies seem like a pretty good idea. On the other hand, advanced might not be able to handle over and over and over high frequency training, but they can probably tolerate pretty high volumes in one session and still be on the plus side of that growth equation without causing too much damage. You guys with me so far? Okay, very cool. Another interesting point here, and all these points converge into eventually leading to the hypothesis. Right? These are reasons for the hypothesis. Neural training, or basically from high frequency training, ooh, cool. What if we don't want to say okay or more info? So, a big benefit for high frequency training is that it makes you technically more sound. How many of you guys have read the Scientific Principles of Strength Training ebook that James and Chad have put out? So, in the ebook we mentioned, and this is confirmed by like about 1 trillion studies in all kinds of sports, technique acquisition, technique stability, especially in beginners, is highly correlated with very high frequencies. If you want to become the best gymnast you can, you train at least twice a day. Okay, because technique, SRA curves, they rise and fall really fast. If you don't do gymnastics for 3 days, you feel like fucking total shit. If you don't do a bicep curl for 3 days, you feel okay because it's a very low technique move. For beginners that don't have a good grasp of techniques yet, if you train them once a week, they will fucking forget how to squat every week. You guys ever had clients like that? They can't make it in the gym often. You're like, all right, time to squat. And they pick up the bar with their hands, and you're like, right, that's a deadlift. Like, same thing, right? Like, no, that's why you're here paying me money. So it's not right. So they'll just straight up forget every time. Not great. And remember that if you have a really low neural efficiency, you can't use that much weight, and you just never get strong enough to overload the physiology much. Not great. So when you're a beginner, another good reason to maybe have higher training frequency is that you really benefit from having a higher technical exposure to the lifts. You start to get really good at the fundamental moves, squatting, pressing, and pulling, and then the derivative moves come easier. Now all of a sudden you're very fluid. If you're thinking of advanced bodybuilding concepts, that means your mind-muscle connection is better, you can just grow shit better, and it doesn't fuck you up as much, and you can lift more weight, all the benefits of being technically proficient. Oh, and another one, your injury risk goes down, right? Because how do you get hurt? You're pretty fucking strong, and your technique sucks. Number one trip to the emergency room. So, high-frequency training, very good for beginners. Decent for intermediates. It's a moot point for advanced, because what do advanced individuals have? They have techniques ingrained. How many people who've squatted for 10 years forget how to squat in a week? Get the fuck out of here. And some people say high frequency training is good for powerlifting because it lets you practice the lifts often. You think Chad Wesley Smith forgets how to fucking lift weights after a week? Fucking kidding me? Most people, there's been stories of weightlifters, some of the Romanian, Bulgarian guys. Be like a coach on the team, and he'll have sandals on and do 150 in the snatch in the warm-up room, cold, just as a joke. What the fuck? That man is never going to forget how to do a snatch. His cold snatch with 150 at 55 years old is going to be more technically sound than lifters you've seen for 5 years at your club, right? Because when you train for long enough, the techniques just straight up never leave. They're very well ingrained. So high-frequency training has a big benefit to beginners because of all those benefits of ingraining technique better, but you don't really need to ingrain technique much better after it's pretty stable. So the ultra-advanced, that's a moot point. Does that make sense? So it's not that high-frequency in point number 6 is bad for the advanced, it just doesn't make as much sense. So you come up to an IFB pro bodybuilder and don't you want to train chest 3 times a week to feel like a more mind-muscle connection with your chest to be better at the exercises? You're going to be like, I don't have a problem with that once a week. You're be like, right, okay, it makes sense. You can do this for 25 fucking years. Does that make sense? So it's not, so the necessity of high-frequency training to get the neurological benefits, the technical benefits just isn't there for more advanced individuals. So all of these points taken together. So first of all, while we're still on the slide, give us a good stare and see if you can come up with any decent questions about these points in particular. If they don't remotely make sense to you, please raise your hand, because remember, this is why you're here. Yeah.
What's your view on protein synthesis, obviously, during the workout? So if you specifically train chest, it's a relative to the chest, obviously, to start in the protein synthesis for that specific muscle, and by increasing the frequency and recycling protein synthesis during that workout with that specific muscle, would that mean a benefit for growth?
Yeah, every time you have an overloading workout, you start the cascade that increases protein synthesis, starts a fractional synthetic rate curve that takes between 1 and 3 days to fall off.
So if you wanted a bigger chest,
You just have to make sure your fractional synthetic rate curve is up as much as it will be throughout the week. The total area under the curve matters. You can accomplish that with 2 very big sessions, or 3 smaller sessions, or 4 very small sessions, and it might be equivalent. If you want to accomplish it with 1 session, it's unlikely because fractional synthetic rates don't stay up that high, especially in beginners. In intermediates, they might stay higher or lower. We're actually not sure. You definitely want to train as often as you can, but the can really comes down to can you recover? Because remember, there's one big caveat to that. Overloading training causes a rise in fractional synthetic rate curves. So if you're like, all right, I had an overloading workout on Monday. If I can overload again, I'll get to you. You can put your head down. If I can have another overloading workout on Wednesday, I can kick my FSR curve back up. Yeah, but if you're too fucked up on Wednesday, whether it's neurally too fucked up or you have a lot of delayed onset soreness, you can't present another overload. And then your Wednesday workout, either just total shit, it doesn't elevate your fractional synthetic rate curve, or it gets you hurt worse, then it's pointless for you to try to train Monday, Wednesday, Friday for your chest. So it might have to be a thing where you train Monday, you grow part of Monday, you grow some of Tuesday, you don't grow Wednesday, you train again on Thursday because that's the first time you're healed enough to present an overload to grow. Does that make sense? It's almost like you figure out, okay, what would be, let's say you just finished a big cut. What would be awesome is if I could have junk food for a whole day in my mouth at all times. Right? Well, what's the limiting factor on that? It's not your taste receptors. That would in fact taste delicious the entire time. It's the fact that you start to get full and you start to get vomiting, you start to get super sick. So you have to take meal breaks. You guys ever had this weird sensation post-show or post-cutting phase where you would love to be eating, but your stomach hurts, but you're still hungry for more junk food? The stomach pain is limiting you at that point. So you have to wait another couple of hours until you can eat a shitload of fucked up food again. It might be the same way with training frequency where, yeah, ideally, if you could present another overload safely, you would do so and you would grow. But that might be out of the equation at that point. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, we would love to present it, but we're simply not healed to be able to do so. Yeah. I was going to use another much cruder analogy about the sexual organs and repeated exposure to opposite or same sex, but you guys can fill in the blanks now. You want to hit it, but you're too beat up. That's where Viagra comes in. And you make a hospital trip later because nothing works. Yes?
So one of the points why men is actually recommending this high frequency training, especially for experienced individuals, he says that basically as experienced you become, the window, I say that 48 hours when your proteins kind of synthesized, it shortens. Basically, you have to train more frequently to kind of fit into this window. So, what's your opinion on that time span when your muscles grow after?
My first opinion is my reading of literature is that it's by no means clear that occurs. It's by no means clear, first of all, that occurs in actual muscle tissue. That protein synthesis is measured as whole body, and that might not actually be at the muscle. So at the muscle, you may not reduce protein synthesis with training age. It may stay the same. It might go up. The rates, curves might go up. We don't know. The second problem I have with that potentially is, okay, so let's say that is the case. Overloading training is what raises protein synthesis. Yes, hypothetically, if you train 6 days a week, you could grow. But if you're not recovered to train any more than 3, it's pointless to try to train 6. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So what he might say is, oh, okay, but if you drop your per session volume, then you can fit more in. Well, then you don't fucking hardly grow at all, because I can guarantee you, if you take an IFB Pro, you give him 2 sets of squats, and you measure how much protein synthesis occurs, it's going to be dick, it's going to be nothing. He needs probably at least 10 sets to see any kind of bump. But the 10 sets that he needs to see any kind of bump in protein synthesis also mandates 4 days of not squatting heavy again, because of all the addendum structural damage, etc. So, first of all, on the idea that these fractional synthetic rate windows shrink with training age, some of the studies we've seen that are not volume adjusted, so it's the same volume every time. Of course it's going to shrink, because it's 3 by 10, 3 by 10, 3 by 10. That's why you do 3 by 10, 4 by 10, 5 by 10, 6 by 10, and then take a deal out, right, to keep the window the same size. And second of all, from what I've seen, it's by no means clear that it's muscular protein synthesis that we're actually talking about it. So I would need much more evidence. If it was in fact the case, which it may be, that as you get more advanced, that window shrinks, there may be nothing to do about that. Because if you say, well, train more frequently, you run into a recovery problem. the people that say that are usually individuals that are not super gigantic and not super strong. And they say, "Oh, I train 6 days a week and I'm super advanced." That's cool, and that might very well work if you're not super muscular or super strong. As soon as you get super muscular or super strong, you cannot maintain those high training frequencies. Curiously enough, in bodybuilding, I know of no one who trains in high frequency and weighs more than 90 kilos. Literally no one. Do you know anyone that trains high frequency? It's just completely unheard. I know people that have tried and they're like, my knees don't work anymore. True story. So that would be my answer to that question. Probably me. I got the fucking debate coming up in a week, baby. I'm gonna try to repeat that shit, except better. Sweet. Back there, and then we'll go up here. And did I skip you all together? Fuck. Him first, then you. Hit it.
I was going to say, obviously, with these points, I'm guessing they apply to strength and power. I know it's about bodybuilding specifically here. And muscle hypertrophy.
They definitely apply to strength and power, but there's not much of a debate there.
Yeah, but with the MRVs, do those volumes and the minimum effective volumes and things like that decrease with strength and power-based sports rather than because obviously volumes such as
Yeah, they can decrease. So the question is, do some of those numbers decrease? Can your maximum recoverable volume decrease with training age? Yes, but you have to get exotically strong. So like if you're squatting more than 300K, you actually can't do as much volume, period. Not even just sets and reps, actual sets times reps times weight times distance. Because the intensity is so high, it just completely fucks up your recovery and your total MRV goes down. So like if I compare my workouts to Chad Wesley Smith's workouts, I can actually do more work. What the fuck? But at his intensities, it's impressive. The thing is, so MRV over training age probably goes up for a long time and just dips a little bit at the end. Can I answer your question?
Yeah.
You first, then, gentleman back there. Go ahead.
Didn't I hear that Jared Feather trains twice a day?
Yes.
How does that work?
He trains every large muscle group twice a week. He trains every small muscle group 4 times a week. It's very similar to what I do. But what he does is he picks a large muscle group to train in the morning and then comes back and trains usually not related small muscle group later that night. Yeah, so it's not like he's training chest twice a day or some shit. I've seen people that ask me that question on Facebook. They're like, can I train chest twice a day? I'm like, oh, fuck. You can try it. I don't know what that would do. It'd be pretty sweet. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I don't want to answer any questions about Jared Feather. Fuck that. I'm going to go back there and then I don't know. But
yeah, I think you kind of just answered it. What I was going to say is, I know the literature doesn't really say much in terms of 2 versus 3 frequency per week. It's obviously above 2, but there doesn't seem to be much studies done between the 2. But I think you kind of just answered it there in terms of what you do by doing 4 times per week for lower body, not lower body, weaker body parts.
Small
yeah,
muscles.
small body parts, sorry. And then 2 for more body parts.
Yeah.
So myself, obviously, when I've gone to frequency 3 times, even when volume was matched, it seems better for me.
Okay.
But, so what would you say about that?
Oh, hit that. That's a good idea. If you think it's best, I would hit it. Just make sure you're being honest about your recovery and your progression.
Yeah.
So, I think, ask me that question after we put the last slide up. Because I have like a career frequency guide and see if you fit into that.
Yeah, because that's what I spend a lot of time doing 2. Deload and then maybe next measure cycle with GOATS 3. And just kind of periodise within training. Seems to work really well. So
you do both 2 and 3 and you seem to think there's a good...
yeah, within a training year. But I mean...
That's really cool.
With a lot of people, depending on their circumstances. So if someone's got a stressful job, for example, or they're really busy, then sometimes they just, even though volume's the same, they can't really handle frequency 3 times.
Maybe.
So,
because it is more taxing on recovery.
Yeah, that's a bit...
Yeah, so then for them to lower it.
So you mentioned about training with a certain level of fatigue is going to be detrimental after that. What are the implications for overreaching with that? So for example, if you're on your 3rd or 4th week of your cycle and you're going to take a deload and you're pretty beat up from training, should you bother trying to overreach if you feel beat up still? Did you get any benefits from that?
That's a really good question. So if you overreach a little earlier than planned, basically...
Well, say you're on your last week of your cycle and you kind of overreaching, but you feel your fatigue levels are quite high. Is there going to be... How can you kind of gauge, am I too fatigued to overreach, or do I try and overreach because I'm going to do it the next week?
I would say that, on average, I would just take the deload early, just to be safe.
Yeah.
And because the benefits of functional overreaching probably aren't as big as the benefits of just chronically presenting good overload.
Yeah.
So I would say take it easy. Another question you can ask is, am I physically capable of overreaching in a directed adaptation manner? So you guys familiar with this? So sub-principle of specificity is called direct adaptation. That means you got to do kind of the same shit for a while to get good at it for it to maintain its abilities. So if you switch exercises like every fucking workout, it doesn't make you as big as if you didn't do that. If you just do squat for a while, as opposed to squat, leg press, hack squat, blah, blah, blah. So the question is, can I present linear expansion over overload that I have been presenting in the mesocycle in the same kinds of variables? So can you overreach just by doing crazy metabolite training and crazy drops, even if you have barely energy? Yes. Can you still put in the same volume? Yes. Is that going to functionally overreach you in that directed adaptation paradigm? No. So the real question is, let's say you squatted 170 for 5x8 with some downsets after last week. You ask the question of, how do I make the decision of if I'm too fatigued to keep going? Well, can you squat 172.5 for 6x8, or at least 5x8 in the next week? If you're like, there's no fucking way I'm going to be healed to do that shit, fucking cut it. If you think I got a shot at the title, take it. I would say 30% of the time, take err on the side of bravery. 70% of the time, err on the side of conservative. Because there's always the next message. Does that answer your question to some extent?
Yeah, I'm ready to myself in terms of doing a high strength drop. If it was strength, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I felt quite beat up, and I thought to myself, if I can do the same or higher with more volume, then it's worth doing. If I can't do it, then probably not.
Very good logic, I would say. But as you get more advanced, you tend to not play with fire as often.
Yep.
Because that overreaching week, that's shit's going to fuck you up. So. You can always do a mini deload too. Take half a week of really easy training and then do another week and a half of hard training. If you really had it all planned out. This kind of like when do I deload stuff is all good and well unless you have like a show or a powerlifting meet coming up. And then you have an actual sequence and you're like, nah, I can't just take an extra deload week because that fucks up my whole paradigm. That's when light days, recovery days are a thing. Another thing I have to say, people play with deload weeks a lot and that's good. They should be playing a little bit more than they do with recovery days when needed. But another thing is let's say you make a choice, you're pretty recovered but not completely, and let's say you say, okay, I want an overreaching week, and it's 3 days until that week starts. For those 3 days and the rest of that overreaching week, you have to do as much as you can physically in your schedule to have as much of the recovery modalities in place as possible. That means you don't stress out, you make the choice not to be stressed, you get tons of sleep, you get great food. Your friends are like, hey, come out to the club. Nope, fuck you. You're not my friends anymore. Delete from phone. Just kidding. None of you have any friends, let's be honest. So, you understand what I'm saying? So if you say, okay, I'm going to try to overreach, you better have your shit in order. Because some people are like, yeah, let's do it. And they go clubbing and shit, and then the whole week is a wash. So if you choose to overreach, if it's 50-50 whether or not you'll survive it or have any benefit, really step on the pedal with recovery modalities. Just go to like a Thai massage place and just check in and live there. It'd be sweet. I don't know if they do massage at all those places. Is that a thing here in the UK? Massage? Huh, all right. Yeah, we have that in the States too. So, the possible implication of all of these 6 points, which you, by the way, have in your notes to look at forever if you like, is that overload frequency that is best, considering all of them, might fall over the career span. Which means overload frequency might go down. Now, does that mean training frequency needs to go down? No. But the training that is overloading might have to become less frequent. So what could that look like? Here's an example. This is just food for thought. Nothing I say is dogmatic. This is not a religion. These are just example numbers that I think are good, but there's definitely some leeway about this stuff, okay? So don't take this as a doctor is also until I'm at year 3, I gotta train everything 4 times a week. False, okay? So, sir, can you stop doing that? You're being really disruptive. You seem awfully German about the way you're doing things. You too. All right, so here's the deal. Just an example of how this would work. For individuals, for the most part, on average, who have trained between 1 to 2 years of training experience, something like whole body routines 4 times or so a week is probably a good average place to start. What I mean by that is if you get a housewife that you're training, it's her first month of training, don't have her do chest on Monday, back Tuesday, shoulders Wednesday, day off, legs Friday, right? 4 times a week whole body is probably something that she can recover from, maximally benefit from, and is way better than super low frequency. 2 to 5 years of training. Individuals who have gained lots of muscle and strength, and this correlates not just training experience, but with how big and strong people get as well. So size and strength are independently related to this as well. For trainees of 2 to 5 years of experience, maybe like an upper-lower split, 3 days a week or something like that. Oh, sorry, 3 times per body part per week is starting to look pretty good. Can some people who have trained up to 5 years in duration survive a 4 time per week for every muscle? Yeah, totally. But a lot of individuals, especially getting close to year 4, year 5, are going to be so much bigger, so much stronger, so much more experienced, and pushing their limits so much further that they're not, how many people can train their medial delts, just keep using that stupid term, side delts and their rear delts 4 times a week, even as advanced? A lot. Fine. How many people can train their quads hard if they're already been training for 4 years, 4 times a week? Raise your hand if you can do 4 overloading quad sessions 4 times a week. Fuck! Right? But if you've been training 1 year, is that really that crazy of an idea? No, it seems just fine. And remember, the per session volume is low for those people. So like it's 3 sets of squats on Monday. Tuesday is 3 sets of front squats. Thursday, it's 3 sets of squats again. Friday is 3 sets of front squats. I mean, that's not crazy if you're just not lifting a ton of weight and if you're really quite inexperienced, but towards the 2 to 5 years, maybe 3 times per week seems more reasonable. Does that make sense? And then maybe something like 5 to 10 years of experience, 2 time a week overload, especially as individuals are getting larger and more muscular, starts to seem like a better idea. And just remember, applies also if you're following the average progression of size and strength increase. For females, all of this is discounted to an automatically higher frequency on average. So a female has been training 5 to 10 years might be 1 step behind or up above, which would be 3 times per week overloading training. But if you're female and you started 5 days a week overloading training, as you get bigger and stronger as a female, you may not be able to sustain that. Because when you were squatting 30 kilos, that was all well and good. Now that you're squatting 60 kilos for reps, you might not be able to do that 6 times a week anymore. Yeah.
Like, what would you be doing with your intensity then? If you're doing like same body part 4 days a week, would you vary that within like an RER kind of scale or an RPE?
I absolutely would. But the importance of that kind of variance also rises with training experience. So how much intensity variation do you need to do for someone in their first 6 months of training? You fucking dick. What do I do today? 4 by 10, 8 or 70%. What do I do tomorrow? 4 by 10, 70%. This is going to be higher. You just get linearly stronger the entire time. But as individuals get more advanced, you start to have distinct heavier and lighter days, distinct repetitions and reserve days. So you have like a 1 from fail day and a 3 from fail day, 1 from fail, 3 from fail, that sort of thing. Absolutely. So the pulsatility of training goes up as the experience goes up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and out of interest, do you kind of incorporate any metabolite training within that? Kind of like a 4 days, so maybe 1 day will be that.
You could, and I would save that for more like the phase in which you do metabolite training.
Yeah.
But you can absolutely incorporate that in, yeah, for sure. For like beginners and shit, I wouldn't even bother with metabolite training.
Yeah.
No fucking tricks. That's just a personal thing. I really don't think beginners benefit much from it. And like, so people like do drop sets and shit like that with like a housewife who's been training for 2 months. Are you fucking kidding me? When's your show? What are you doing? Like, just fucking meat and potatoes. People ask me what I think about like Mark Rubto. You guys know like starting strength. Like, it's a fucking great program. That's what I think. For starting fucking strength, it's a great program. If you're doing it after 5 years, fucking weird. You should probably stop. But up to 5 years of training, definitely the first 2, fucking squat, bench, deadlift, press, etc., 4 times a week, fucking amazing. I mean, every housewife in the UK should do that.
Would this be appropriate for, let's say, a person who's been training 10 years or so, but they've had a year off for an injury or whatever, and then they're coming back? Would you then apply these principles in shorter phases?
Probably.
So total body, then into uppers, and then once they're back to
once they're back to work, then they can go back to lower frequency. Absolutely. Yep. That's a good question.
So then 10 to 15 years of training, you get into potentially like a twice a week routine, but what I call biased. So that's to your question back there. So 5 to 10 years of training, you'd have something like a really heavy back workout on Monday and another really heavy overload back workout on Thursday. both fuck you up. 10 to 15 years, you might do a really heavy back workout on Monday, and on Thursday, you might do a lot of rowing on Monday and just a bit of vertical pulling. On Thursday, you might have to do a lot of overloading vertical pulling and just a little bit of rowing, because you won't be able to overload rowing twice in the same week. It might be too much. Does that make sense? Or you have one distinctly really hard back workout on Monday and an easier back workout, still overloading, but easier one on Thursday. So if we're talking about volume landmarks, you're shooting for maximum adaptive volume on Monday, but just at minimum effective volume on Thursday. Does that make sense? You can no longer shoot for MAV twice in the same week between 10 and 15 years experience, because it's too much fatigue accumulation from your overload. That's really the big driver of all this. The hard workouts just start being so hard you can't overload. Do we have a hand raised back there? I saw some. Yes.
Sorry, with with volume, could you just use the same volume but just manipulate RPEs, or is it a must to increase volume over time? Obviously, we're talking about 5, 10, 15 years. Could you still stimulate growth by just manipulating RP and intensities?
Yes, but I don't think it'd be maximum growth. I mean, so one of the gold standards of exercise science research has shown that the ability to execute volume goes up with your training age until you get to super exotic strong, and your MRV goes down, but your volume tolerance goes up, and volume has also been very closely associated with hypertrophy. So I think that if you're trying to get around not increasing volume, that's like trying to ask the question of, can you get stronger without lifting more weight? Yeah, but that's by no means the optimal way to do it. So I would say increasing volume is a very good idea. Do you have to increase volume every microcycle, independent of increasing RER and intensity? No, you can still get good results. I think you get better results if you increase volume. Do you have to increase volume every mesocycle? No, but you'd be really missing out. Can you get away every macrocycle without increasing volume? Probably not. As a matter of fact, the biggest correlate, both in literature and in observation to really giant people, is their volume tolerance, not necessarily their intensity. So our bodybuilders in the pro ranks, the strongest people on the planet, no, they're really fucking strong. What separates really good bodybuilders from others is their ability to handle volume. Have you guys ever seen volume in a real hardcore bodybuilding program for a top level guy? Shit is fucking absurd. Like, you did 5 sets of 12 of rows as the first of 5 exercises? Like, yeah. You can ask the guy, why don't you do less than that? Because it won't grow me. That sucks. And there's your answer to why a lot of individuals, outside of their independent anabolic benefits, take anabolic steroids and other pharmacological agents. Their necessities for volume are so high, they have to take those drugs to recover to be able to keep going. Because it's all fun and games until you've done like 70 sets of back. And then you're like, well, I'm going to die, or I'm going to take anabolics. That's how I started. I'm totally kidding.
So would you say maximal recoverable volume would increase with training age?
Absolutely.
To what extent? I mean, where do you say enough is enough? Kind of like you
Your
said,
body will tell you.
if you go into most of the websites or famous Instagrams or whatever, people bang out like 20 sets, 25, 30 sets, and people are like, oh, that's cool because that works, right? That's got to get bigger, right?
Yeah, so there's 2 confounding problems with that. One, the people who are the fans usually have like 10 years less training experience than the guy doing that, so the MRV is not that high. They try to train for 20 sets and it's over their MRV and they get fucked up. And 2 is they're not nearly the pharmacological assistance that the person is doing that with. Now the funny thing is that if you start pharm at the right time, and I really do think there's a right time, that's when you've reached all close to your natural limits, then pharm is just to keep your MRV the same for a while and then keep it from falling really fast. It's not to increase it. So the comical maximum recoverable volume is if you take someone who's been training for about a year or 2 and is still really small, and you gear them to the gills, which is hilarious and pointless, they can probably have MRVs of like 40 sets per week. But you could just get that growth from not doing that and just putting in a couple of extra years for sure. So I would say, when you're looking at Instagram and people are doing 30-set workouts, 40-set workouts, like I've said about MRV for a while, you have to know what yours is now for that body part and just use that as your training landmark. It doesn't fucking matter who whatever on Instagram is doing. But if we look at bodybuilders as a population, yeah, with training age, their MRVs go up until they get really big and really strong, which is when they either MRVs start to dip or they make the decision to become enhanced. If they become enhanced, then their MRVs continue to go up a little bit, and they still go down. Eventually, it doesn't matter how much gear you take, your MRV will still go down. But you might be able to hit for another 5 or 10 years of MRV increase, for sure. That makes sense? Yeah. So all comes down to personalization. You back there, so
yeah, in terms of if you're prioritising one, say, muscle group, and you're obviously increasing the volume per week, the other ones you're maybe maintaining, would you still be increasing the volume on those, or will the volume stay the same throughout the...
If your goal is maintenance, you do not increase volume through the muscle cycle. You might increase intensity to get stronger, or you might not, depending on your level of advancement. If you're beginner and intermediate, you can at least get stronger on those body parts and increase intensity. If you're more advanced, maintenance means you come in, you squat 200 kilos for 3x5, and that's it. Next workout, 3x5, 200 kilos. Workout after that, 3x5, 200 kilos. That's it. That makes sense? You just never go up. And then when you switch gears and prioritize legs again, then you start to go back. Yeah. Let me finish this really quick before the next question. I'll get to you in just a second. I think, yeah, so there's one more there. So 15 plus years of experience, you might get into 1 per week dedicated body part workout with a lighter recovery session another time in the week later. Unfortunately, that's what I have to do with a lot of my muscle groups now. For chest, for legs, and for back, not hamstrings, but for quads, I have to do 1 big workout per week and a smaller, probably MEV, somewhere between maintenance volume and MEV volume workout later in the week. I can't handle 2 hard workouts anymore for my big body parts. It simply just doesn't work. If I tried, I would have to lower my overall volume so much, my overall volume would be under my minimum effective volume. Does that make sense? So if you're dogmatic about training frequency, no, I have to have 4 overloading sessions per week. You may be able to survive only 2 sets at a time. 2 times 4 is 8 sets total. But you may be able to survive 12 sets in a big workout and then another 4 sets in an easier workout. That's 16 sets. So if you bias your workout, really a huge workout at the beginning of the week and a small workout later, you may have a total workout volume per week of 16 sets. But if you insist on doing 4 days a week of overload, every single overload would have to be so small that you only have 8 sets total. So forget about these muscle growth windows. Your overall volume's half of what it could be. Does that make sense? So it's like these IFB Pro bodybuilders do these 30-set chest workouts. Yes, that's fucking stupid to some extent, especially if a younger, smaller lifter tried it. But if you say, why don't you just do 5 sets of chest 6 days a week? Well, on day number 3, one of their pecs is going to come clean off their fucking body because it's just going to be so much damage that it takes them a week to heal from that damage. Does that make sense? Because the injury to the musculature etc. is so vastly disproportional to how much growth they're getting out of it. Right? We'll talk about this a lot in the delayed onset muscle soreness discussion. When people say, like, why should you even get sore at all? Like, you can get plenty of growth without being sore. Yeah, if you're a beginner, fuck yeah. You can grow without getting sore at all. If you're super advanced, most of the muscle protein turnover that you cause may be damage and damage healing. And some small fraction of it is actual hypertrophy on the net balance. And someone could say, well, if you just did less, well, if you did less, it'd be the same ratio, except hypertrophy would go down to almost nothing. And you're just getting muscle damage. That sucks, right? How do we obviate that? We don't. That's the harsh reality. How come you guys think genetic ceilings exist? If you don't just keep getting bigger forever, the amount of damage you do as a relationship. So after you work out for 36 hours after, 48 or whatever, a certain amount of muscle protein turnover. Some of that goes to healing the muscle. Some of it goes to building new muscle. That ratio, if you're training properly, is as good as it gets real early in your career. And it goes to dog shit towards the end of your career. So most of the training I'm doing, most of the soreness I experience is causing dick, except for healing me for the next session. And a little bit of it is growth. For some of you folks here a little bit newer to the game, maybe half of it is causing growth. What am I supposed to do about that? I don't know. You guys have a fucking time machine or super magic drugs? There is nothing to do about that. Does that make sense? It's a constraint we simply have to live with. So for individuals that have been training for a long time, it might be the case that all they can handle is is just 1 big session per week. But we have really good news here. Let's go back to one of these really quick. Yeah. So similar to neural training, And another point on here that's worth mentioning is this. Advanced lifters conserve muscle tissue more easily than beginners. So beginners, if they grow muscle for 2 days after their training session, what happens on day number 3 if they're beginners? For 2 days after we get growth, and then growth stops. What happens on day number 3, or at least day number 4? Maintenance for day number 3, and then day number 4 they start fucking losing. That sucks, because they're super apt to lose. Beginners just don't hold muscle very well. More advanced people, if you're training for 15 plus years, they've demonstrated that you don't lose any muscle on a DEXA for like 3 weeks if you don't actually train with weights. Fuck! So if you take a hard workout at the beginning of the week, can someone tell you, like, bro, you're not training chest again later in the week? You're like, nope, you're going to lose muscle. False. You're going to keep your muscle, but you're going to have a lot more time to recover so you can crest that big wave again next week, have it fall, crest it again, have it fall. You need that time to recover. Does that make sense? So that's kind of this little system here, this understanding that I developed that explains pretty well why Marcus Roll and Ronnie Coleman train their chest once a week, and why bro at the Soho gym down the street should be training it 4 times a week, and if he's training it once a week like Ronnie, he's fucking stupid, right? This is my general understanding of how that will work for the reasons that I have mentioned.
I've got 2 questions. First one is, how would you organise 4 times a week whole body sessions? Would you, because I would normally do Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Fuck, man, there's like 1,000 different ways. I'm not particular to any of them.
Yeah. Would you do two of the same whole body sessions back to back, or would you just do whole body but different exercises?
Either way works. I think that for very, very beginners, it's just the same movements every day.
Yeah.
And for people like more than 6 months of training, you would start to alter movements. And for people with like a year and a half of training, you can alter movements and RERs a little bit. And then for people up to 2 years of training, you can alter movements, RERs, and rep ranges a little bit.
Yeah.
That's like a little food for thought. Am I like dogmatic about that? No. But just more variation as you progress.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Second question?
Yeah, second one was, you mentioned you train each body part once except for your hamstrings.
Each big body part once except for my hamstrings.
Yeah.
Because they still seem to heal on time.
Your hamstrings.
But for my smaller body parts, I train them shits 4 times a week.
Yes.
Yeah, and my triceps I train twice a week too, pretty hard.
Is that just an individual thing? Because obviously, if the hamstrings are more fast twitch, I find if I do my hamstrings directly, then I'm screwed for like 5 days.
Totally. So definitely an individual thing. For most people, their hamstrings will start to become resistant to high frequency earlier than their quads. My quads are so much bigger than my hamstrings, though. I think that's the biasing factor, and I have weak hamstrings for my physique anyway. So.
Yeah.
Can we stop talking about my hamstrings? The reason I'm sitting down is so motherfuckers can't see them. But yeah, it's got to be a personal thing. Like if that muscle can still recover from high frequency training, high frequency training in a theoretical sense, high frequency overload, if you can recover from and make gains, is better than low frequency. Do it. So if I want to leave you guys with any big lessons for this, if you can train with high frequency, you can get away with. But don't kid yourself if you can't get away with it. And if you have to start fucking with your plan big time to get away with high frequencies, like, all right, I'm training 6 days a week, but I only do 1/2 of a set every day. Fuck are you really in there for? Nothing, right? So if you can train with overloading sessions 4 times a week, fucking do it. But if it's only twice a week, or if it's even only once a week, and the other session has to be a recovery session, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Is that something they say here in the UK? Cookie crumble?
Yeah, they're going to talk about deload frequency or career span.
I wasn't, but I can address it if you like.
Yeah.
So the question of deload frequency over a career span, I think in a properly designed program, deload frequency increases over the career span. But this lower frequency is one way to kind of obviate that. So if you train super hard only once a week, you can actually not deload for a while because you get plenty of fatigue reduction every single time. But generally speaking, all things being equal, you're going to have to deload more frequently as an advanced than as a beginner. As a beginner, for the first 10 weeks you train someone, maybe 16, they do not need to deload. They just don't. You just fucking train. Like, I'm great. So generally speaking, should beginners be doing a 4-to-1 paradigm for hypertrophy? Fuck no. 5-to-1, 6-to-1. You can pull off a 7-to-1 maybe. The biggest thing about it is how fast are you progressing microcycle to microcycle, and are you being honest with yourself? That's why autoregulation is so powerful. If you religiously commit yourself to a 7-to-1 paradigm, which means 7 accumulation weeks and 1 deload week, if you go up by just a little bit each time, because remember, MEV is really low and MRV is decent for beginners and intermediates, that's a long time to progress from one to the other. But if your MEV is right here and your MRV is right here, you go 2 up, 1 down. That's it, for sure. And that's definitely in strength. You see this very, very clearly. People have very short mesocycles. You just can't fuck shit up all that much. Either you drop your frequency in the week, or you get more deloads. It's one or the other, right? Does that make sense? So honesty with yourself is the biggest thing. If you religiously say 7 to 1, and by week 5 you're like vomiting up blood, it's time for a deload, right? Like, no man, 7 to 1, baby. Like, don't do that shit. And the other side of the equation, and this is something that's, so I'm a big fan of economics recreationally. Who the fuck says that, right? Fucking weird nerds. I did not have any friends growing up, as you can clearly tell. There's a thing in economics where if a government policy leads to costs that are never seen, nobody can really vote against them because you never knew how good you could have had it. So we have to talk about that. We obviously know that if you're training way too much before deloading, it's very visible bad effects. But not enough, and you're deloading too often, you always feel good. You don't know how many gains you're missing out on if you felt worse. Does that make sense? In one of the clear ways, again, female lifter with older brother / boyfriend, not the same person, unless you're from the country, and then same person, and then so basically, you know, females who tag along with males and do their workouts with weights scaled, I've seen females do 2 to 1 paradigm. You're fucking kidding me? You could do 12 to 1 and be just fine, right? So it has to be individual. Does that make sense? Because those females always felt really good. They just never made really good gains. But were they ever overtrained? Are you fucking kidding me? I've seen females doing a West Side protocol. What's that weight class? Like 60, 62.5, 70 weight class kind of powerlifter females do a 3-week taper into a meet. That, you could take like half a week and be peaked. Marissa Inda takes like a week at most. It is just fucking great, right? 3 weeks is insane. That is also actual muscle loss and fitness characteristic loss. So you have to be concerned with how long your accumulation is. It has to be personal. You have to be honest. Am I presenting overload still? Am I fatigued not enough to not present overload? Am I recovering well? If the answer is yes, fucking keep going. If you're too beat up, cut it and figure out why it occurred. Did it occur because that was the month that your girlfriend broke up with you and stabbed you in the face a bunch of times, and that's how you accumulated fatigue? Baby, why did you laugh so hard at that? So anyway, or is that, was that a really good month for really good food, really good sleep, and your body just can't make it anymore? Does that make sense? And that number will change for you. The frequency that used to work might not work anymore, as we can tell. So as you progress through various career points, you may realize that you have to drop the frequency. Or as you are recovering better due to better lifestyle stuff, you may be able to raise the frequency, so on and so forth. And this is another reason why copying people's programs is fucking ridiculous, and why people who train other people like they've trained themselves, fucking ridiculous. When I wrote, I was the main author on the male physique templates. You guys ever use male physique templates? When I wrote it, some of the workouts I would laugh at. If I tried that, I would die. But they're not for me. Does that make sense? So if someone, that's a good way to spot a good coach. I'm a fucking terrible coach. I'm a programmer. A good programmer, a good coach versus a bad one. If a good coach, or if you see a coach and all their shit they write for everyone else looks the same as what they do, nah. If the shit is good on principle but looks pretty different depending on the clients, maybe they're onto something. That makes sense? Yeah. Questions. So let's go. We're gonna go back there, up here, and then there.
Hi.
Yes.
The career span we've got on the screen. For a natural trainee, will they ever see the 15+ year section in terms of growing? Will they be able to grow 15+ years?
Yeah, probably. Just slowly. Yeah, it also depends on when you start.
15 years ago.
So, like, if you start in high school or something, that means you're 30 years old. I think natural trainees can see progress in muscular hypertrophy up into their mid-30s. If you're on drugs, it's probably another 5 years more than that. So yes, but if you're in your 40s, can you gain muscle as a natural trainee? If you started that long ago, probably not. What is his training history?
30 years.
He's trained
Thir-
since 30 years
30
already.
years of consistent training?
Yeah.
And he's still getting muscularly bigger?
Yeah.
So,
Now I think he turned 46 or 45 this year.
yeah.
And stepping on stage. And I think this is actually his anniversary. So, in terms of training, 30 years. And yeah, he said it himself that he's still growing and making continuous progress.
How skeptical am I willing to be of that claim? I'm this is 3D MJ guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all those guys are rock stars. They're the shit. So I have a ton of respect for everything they say. And respect, I mean intellectual respect as well as personal. Is he growing still? Yeah, I'd like to see DEXA scans on that, to be honest. Would be very impressive. Is he a genetic outlier? Possibly. Another biasing factor that you tend to notice with individuals who grow for a really long time is he's the Godfather, right? You see the Godfather? I mean, so he like came up with a bunch of this shit like during his career. So if you ask him, I guarantee you'd be like, hey, what was your training like in year one? Was it optimal 3D MJ? He'd be like, you're not kidding me, it was probably terrible. So his training has gotten better, which has allowed him to tap into more growth as he's gone along. That's what's gotten me a lot of growth is like, I used to do stupid shit. I'm surprised I grew at all. So when you do smarter and smarter shit, and that's kind of like a super optimistic thing all of you guys have to look forward to is as you get better at the training process, as you get more scientifically precise, you're going to tap into growth you never thought was there. If you had a time machine to come back to your younger self and expose yourself to real science, you would have grown so much faster that you would have been done growing by now, something like that. Does that make sense? So as you fine-tune your training and your nutrition, you find ways to grow into later years. But when I say this shit, I mean optimal application for this long, which fucking nobody has. One of the things I'm super jealous about with Jared Feather is that I was his professor when he was like only 5 years into training or 7 years. So as soon as I started teaching him shit, he just fucking started getting super jacked and didn't get hurt much. And he's like, what did you used to train like in undergrad? And I was like, oh, fuck. I was an HIT advocate. I was like a Mike Menser hit guy. Well, I would debate people about it too. I would love to kick my own ass. Just come out of a fucking wormhole and front kick myself. Like, you're a bitch. And Arthur Jones sucks. And just leave. I'd be like, fuck. That guy looked a lot like me. He was jacked. Arthur Jones. Oh no. Anyway, next person in the yes, you. Do you have a question? Okay, great. It's between you fellas. Damn.
Yeah, so when you finish your accumulation block basically and you deload, what would you do in terms of going back to volume? Would you make like an increase in percentage or would you just kind of go back to the volume you were doing at the start of the block and rely on obviously load increasing throughout?
The average answer is that you would increase your load a little bit and you would start at probably the equivalent of a week 2. You wouldn't go all the way back down, but you'd go down mostly.
Yeah.
Because remember, a week of deload really makes you more sensitive to volume. If you tried to go back to week 5 of volume right after a deload week, you get so fucking sore that most of your protein turnover would be for recovery. I mean, it would just be way too much. So you come back to like week 2 and go up to week 5. So you go like that, like that, like that. And eventually you're all the way up here. Right? So that if you look over 2 years, your week 1 volume is like what your week 5 used to be, but it takes a while to get there.
Of course, yeah, sure.
If you're making really big transitions in exercise mode, you also make bigger reductions for that. So if you go from doing, for example, high bar squats for 3 months and trying leg presses for the first time, don't you dare put 5 sets of fucking leg press in that first week. Put 2 sets, because 5 sets will break your fucking legs off your body. This is such a novel stimulus. So if you're rotating in very new exercises, start nice and low.
Cool. So you mentioned the fact that sort of older, the more experienced or more advanced you get, the better you get at retaining or holding on to the tissue you've got. So wouldn't that sort of cross-transfer into the Jeff discussion with regards to him being older, therefore, with him being a competitive bodybuilder, he was getting better at just retaining the muscle that he had throughout his contest prep, rather than making any sort of potential hypertrophy.
Maybe. Yeah, I've never thought of that. That's a very good idea. So, because he's more advanced, he doesn't lose as much in every cutting phase. And with naturals, that is a concern. Although it was not a big concern unless you're dieting really wrong. Maybe, but he just doesn't lose much show to show, and some of his competitors might. They have to rebuild back up. But with the myonuclear domain stuff, the building back up is usually super easy. It just occurs within the next couple of weeks anyway. So, maybe, yeah, we're just sure to do a fucking seminar to explain why Jeff Alberts is basically a god. Yeah, it's amazing to be making gains at that age. That's awesome. Next, you right here, and then over here. You wait your turn, sir.
I was just wondering, in regards to something like track cyclists, so sprint track cyclists.
Bro, this is a fucking bodybuilding talk.
I know. Yeah. They have like obviously pretty jacked legs overall as an athletes themselves, and they obviously do train with certain volumes and stuff. But obviously being on the bike with that high volume there, how do you reckon that accumulates into that maximum recoverable volume?
Yeah, they have crazy MRVs.
Yeah.
And they have big legs in part because they put in so much volume to their legs. So they have a lot of advantages. So when you look at track cyclists' legs, they have a couple of things going for them to explain why do track cyclists have big legs. I used to train track cyclists back when I was at ETSU as a PhD student. So people look at it and they go, should we all be training like them? Okay, so here's some of the biasing factors we have there. Number one, the people that you see in pictures for track cycling are national teams. They have the best quad genetics of all time. You cannot pedal that fucking hard unless if you have puny little fucking bullshit quads, you ain't even gonna make the German national team ever. So these people have the freakiest quad genetics to begin with. Second of all, they all squat all the fucking time. They squat a lot. So people say they just ride the bike. Nobody fucking rides the bike on the national team. They all squat like 2 or 3 times a week, hard. The only time they don't squat hard is when they're in season. They might squat only 1 or 2 times a week at high intensities but low volumes. They're on the bike all the fucking time. Another thing, they're on the bike so goddamn much, their quads get a ton of stimulus just from riding the bike. But that is not cycling. That is velodrome cycling. That's them standing and damn near breaking the handles off by pushing as hard as they fucking can into each pedal. You don't do that shit in a regular fucking Soho gym. You will get kicked out because you broke the pedals off the bike. Like, sir, the old lady here is disturbed by what you call track cycling. She just doesn't have what it takes. And also, sorry to burst bubbles, tons of those guys are on nasty farm. So, yeah, you know, they have big legs. And people say, like, well, we shouldn't, and I'm not saying that you're saying that. But some people be like, shouldn't we be looking at track cyclists as to how to get big legs? They have even bigger legs than bodybuilders. No, they fucking don't have bigger legs than bodybuilders. They like to look bigger because their upper bodies aren't that big, right? We had a guy who's on the U.S. national team now at East Tennessee State, Jeff Fryer, amazing guy, drug-free, and he had legs that were obscene looking, just quads just didn't look right. Him and I measured, we had the same circumference of quad, but his femur was longer than mine, so he could generate really nasty torque. So see him ride a bike to school was insane, because I was like, you're going to die on one of these streets sooner or later. And he had huge quads, but they looked way bigger on him than they did on me. Because his upper body was like a normal muscular person's, and my upper body was my fucking upper body. Like, if I lost 20 kilos in my upper body, my quads would look like something from outer space, right? So all those factors together, and track cyclists start to look explainable. Right? So if you're thinking of going to the velodrome for bigger legs, talk to track cyclists, ask them how they got their bigger legs. They'd be like, growth hormone, testosterone, and squats. Like, what about the bike? Like, well, yeah, we fucking ride the bike, but your legs don't get big enough from the bike. You look at a time when track cyclists were not lifting weights several decades ago, and when they were not using farm, did any of them have gigantic, like, who was that one German dude? Of course, he was fucking German. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah. He's these fucking absurd looking quads. Now, like, Flex Lewis has probably bigger quads, but his upper body just looks different, right? But this guy's crazy quads, he lifts weights, and you see nothing about farm.
I can add something to it, and I know the guy who trains him, strength-wise. Robert Firsterman squats, I think, 220 kilos for 8 reps also, and he has a myostatin deficiency. So in his quads, so this is why his quads look so freakishly big.
That's so sweet, man. You call that a deficiency. Fuck that. You need to reword that. You motherfuckers have too much myostatin. That's your problem. Same here. Damn.
What was his name?
Robert Forstemann. I'm not sure what his face looks like. Show me a picture of his face. Show me his quads. Now we're talking. Yeah. Look him up if you want. It doesn't look right. But bodybuilder. If he was a bodybuilder, he'd have to train his upper body for like 10 years straight. You know? Yeah, Yahoo. Interesting note on genetics and muscle retention. How many of you guys know who Branch Warren is, professional bodybuilder? From what I understand, he took an entire year off of leg training and barely lost any leg muscle, just to bring up his upper body. Because he had to lower his total body MRV, or he has to make room in his total body MRV, so he chuck his whole leg workout out, do that much more upper body, call up his upper body, and then he started taking second at the Olympia, winning the Arnold, etc. But before that, he had huge legs and not a very impressive upper body, relatively speaking, so it was a good decision on his part. But how many of you guys could take a year off of leg training and not see any losses? That's fucking insane. And he says, as soon as he started training legs, once a month, he started growing again. I was like, if I was him, I would just shoot for the moon and try to have the biggest quads of all time. Fuck it. Fuck balance and winning shows and getting paid. Just want big quads. Go ahead right here.
It was along the same lines. Could you talk more towards the science of why the more advanced you get, you can hold on to muscle versus a beginner? You say that advanced people could have 3 weeks before they start seeing muscle loss.
So most of the science is just observational, experimental. It's not mechanistic in the sense that we're not quite sure what it is. We do know that a big part of it now seems to be that myonuclear migration, right? So as soon as you have these satellite cells, you have muscle, and around them you have satellite cells with just nuclei that don't do much. If you reach the muscle's top end limit for how much each nucleus controls of the cell, and you start to have problems with the nucleus controlling parts of the cell that are too big, they're too far away, you start to incorporate satellite cells, bring in more nuclei to run that muscle better, like it's a command and control center. And as that nuclei is brought in, it runs a bigger part of the cell, et cetera, et cetera. If you stop training, so the nuclei are really important. They literally are where protein synthesis that message of protein synthesis begins, right? They're really important to that. So when you stop training, let's say, the myonuclear, so the muscle starts to shrink, but the number of nuclei doesn't change. All the new ones you brought in, they're pretty much still there. So when you start training again, wow, they just get super huge because you have double the nuclei somebody else does. So because you have the nuclei incorporated, it means they have a much easier time maintaining that muscle mass, and when it shrinks a little bit, they can bring it back really fast. There's probably some immune labeling that goes on, but once you have tissue for long enough, it gets labeled differently and isn't as apt to get catabolized through apoptosis, etc. I'm not privy to that kind of research outside of my area of expertise. I do know that experimentally, it's a big deal. Yeah, you in the back, you seem to have very pressing.
Going on from that question, does that change with regards to how much of a kind of calorie deficit you put yourself in terms of how much you risk muscle tissue loss based on satellite cell recruitment and activation?
I'm not sure. I actually have no idea. So are you saying that if you starve yourself enough, even your satellite cells pop off or something like that?
All right. As the degree of calorie deficit increases, will those muscles that have a bigger satellite cell grouping be more resistant to more aggressive dieting?
They're probably resistant to muscle loss under all conditions versus other kind of muscles. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
What's your view on if you try and bring up a muscle part? Obviously, what's your view on trying to get the most out of it? To try and obviously speed up the process. I know it's not possible, but anyway, in order to increase the total body MRV and be able to work on that muscle, and if you have overpowering, obviously, body parts, would you go off them altogether and just try and emphasize on this specific muscle group to get it with the symmetry, or would you still do maintenance sets? Or
it depends on where you're at in your career, what kind of growth you're getting, and how important it is for you to get to a higher level of balance and how far away you are from that. So for example, if you are 25 years into your training career and you are one small muscle group away from winning the Mr. Olympia, and people say, look, either you bring up your lats, you're never going to win, but everything else is fucking awesome, but you change a fucking thing. It's pointless for you to try to grow anything else because it's all perfect already. It's pointless for you to ditch damn near everything else and do only lat workouts. Does that make sense? To clear all the MRV space you can and just do only lats, for sure. If you've been training for 6 months and your pecs are a little smaller than your back, do you stop training your back altogether and just train pecs? Yeah, so you can fucking look less than mediocre 2 weeks later. Fuck would you do that for? So I would say, I'll give you a more formal analysis. If you are a beginner, don't you fucking bother prioritizing shit. Just train everything. You don't even know what your strong points are yet. Up until 5 years of training, don't fucking take a break on everything. Train everything to MAV. And you will be able to recover maximum adaptive volume. So cycle between MAV and MRV just like with everything else. after like maybe 5 to 10 years, you might want some things to grow faster than others. Keep those cycling from MEV to MRV, keep them at maximum adaptive volume on average, but the things you want to deprioritize, just keep them around MEV, minimum effective volume. So they're still growing, just slowly. Does that make sense? If you're more advanced, 10 to 15 years, your deprioritized body parts you'll take to maintenance volume, okay? So MV, right, you still train them, but just very little, and then you still cycle at MAV for your ones that you want to train a lot, you want to grow. And then if you're super duper crazy fucking ultra advanced, the earlier example I gave, you can drop total volume to just make pure space in your total body MRV, and then train the muscles you want at your high priority MEV to MRV level. Does that make sense? Do you guys catch all that? I can repeat it if possible. You guys are all fucking super sharp. So, does that make sense? So when people say like, "Oh, I'm going to book and stop training my back so my chest can grow," you're like, "Motherfucker, nobody noticed you trained at all. You put on a t-shirt, you disappear. So don't you worry about that, right? And you don't want to be the kind of person that like, you know, you thought you had a dominant body part, you detrained it to bring up a smaller one, and some guy beats you at a show on your dominant body part, and he's like, "Yeah, my chest has always come easy to me," and you're like, "Yeah, same here, but I stopped training it for a year to bring up my back, and I still weigh 60 kilos." Right? But if it's up to you to win the Mr. Olympia and your lats or your biceps are just not big enough and everything else looks fucking great, you can take 6 months off of everything else. And if 1 month after you come back, it will all come back as crystal clear and actually nice and injury recovered as it ever was. And your lats or your biceps or whatever you need to bring up are now back to much bigger than they were and more balanced. Does that make sense? So the extremity to which you bias things away increases with career span and with the necessity of the situation.
I was just going to say, can we move to DOMs and then come on to questions, but just so we can get it before lunch?
You like getting it before lunch, don't you? I have to. You can't underhand pitch me the shit. Knock it out of the park. Okay, is that cool? DOMs before lunch?
Yep.
We'll start squatting. Fuck. Oh, talking about it. Shit. All right. Oh, this one's actually quite short. So, Steve, what do you want me to finish?
Oh, we're looking 12:30, 12:45.
Okay, cool. DOMs before lunch, and when do you want me to finish? Ooh, that's sorts of strange, inappropriate talks in rooms with mostly men, or very appropriate. Do you guys look at Americans as like more socially liberal or like less? Less, because we're like Christian, crazy, conservative. Trump 2016. Cunts, yeah. Yeah, don't talk shit to me, motherfuckers. We got Trump. You're on alert. You know what I'm saying? He's got the nuclear missile guy with the fucking suitcase. That motherfucking goes everywhere Trump goes, which is really scary. Yahoo. I'll try to keep this as not political as possible. I already fucked that up. Alright. So, DOMs and hypertrophy. I've been getting a lot of shit for this recently, which is sweet. And what is the relationship between delayed onset muscle and hypertrophy? I'm going to throw out some ideas and let you guys see what you think, and then we'll do some questions. So here's the deal. DOMs, I think, has something to do with hypertrophy. Here are some reasons. There are a couple of direct studies that say damage is bad for muscle growth. All of these studies, to my knowledge, are in untrained individuals, and they slam them with normal volumes. And they show that in the early part of training, there is very little growth, and then the growth starts to get higher in the later parts of training. And people have postulated all sorts of things like maybe there's like a delayed effect, maybe there's this, maybe there's that. How about you're fucking killing them early, and the only time they start to really start to swim versus sink is towards the later part of the workout when they've accumulated enough training experience to not be damaged beyond all sorts of crazy belief. So if we're saying that damage is bad for growth and we're using those studies, we're just using overreaching studies basically and saying like, yeah, getting into a car accident is bad for growth. It's the equivalent of the volume these people are experiencing. The kind of DOMs that people experience when you do 3x10 squats and 3x10 leg presses 3 times a week when it's their first week of training is unfucking believable. And I don't think anyone's advocating getting DOMs like that regularly. I sure as hell am not advocating that. I don't know who the hell else. Do you guys remember any of you start training like that where you just do the kitchen sink the first week you can't move shit, you can't brush your own teeth, like, that's probably so much damage. You might lose muscle under those conditions, forget about growing. So those studies are not very pertinent to the examination of moderate levels of damage in more advanced lifters that can tolerate them. That's point one. Point two, at least one histological study in which I like to send to people to annoy them. Histological means a direct examination of tissue shows that DOMS is literally the symptom of sarcomeres being taken out, damaged sarcomeres, and non-damaged ones literally replacing them. They've observed this. Okay? Fuck. So all of a sudden, DOMS is back, and it is the holy grail of growth. That study has never been replicated to my knowledge, or at least very often, and there's some very serious considerations there that might not be the case. But to say that DOMS has nothing to do with the growth process is, I think, a little bit adventurous. So just in case we get too adventurous, we have some studies saying that DOMS is very related to growth. When you look at reviews of the literature, specifically the big lit reviews, one of them being Brad Schoenfeld's reviews, how many of you have read his reviews? You better fucking all of them. Yes, goddammit. Who's Brad Schoenfeld? I will throw the microphone. All right. So in all the reviews of literature I've seen, damage seems to be linked to growth. And we'll see why a little bit as to the kind of training methods that promote damage also seem to promote growth. But even King of Hypertrophy, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, even in his textbook, says that damage is probably in some way either correlated to or causative of hypertrophy, literal homeostatic disruption. Is it the only part of the equation? Probably not. Is it some part? Probably. So there have been people saying recently that the damage has nothing to do with growth. Nah, that's an uphill battle. That is a very, very interesting point. And we'll get to why it's particularly interesting in just a little bit. On a purely theoretical basis, reasoning from just logical paradigms, the very nature of the overload principle implies that damage should be some factor for growth. How do you get a system to change its parameters without disruption? That violates the logic of human and animal evolution. Think about it. Something non-challenging that doesn't mess anything up? What is the reason that adaptive mechanisms would even activate? Your body doesn't give a fuck about making you bigger, it cares about survival. It makes most alterations to physiology when this physiology has been pushed beyond some limit, where the body goes, fuck, what we have is currently not sufficient. And that's probably going to require some damage. When you fuck a muscle up, you give it so much volume or so much intensity or such high forces or something other that messes it up, literally damaging it, that requires the infiltration of the immune system, etc., maybe then it would stand to reason it's going to do something about it in hypertrophy. But if you have a training style that doesn't damage it at all, what would be the necessity of hypertrophy? Why is your body hypertrophy? Now that's just purely conjectural. But conjecture is a part of our reasoning process. It would sure be funny if you could get amazing growth without ever challenging the physiology at all. That would be pretty sweet. Doesn't seem likely. It wouldn't be my first guess. It would be awful odd. Here's a real big kicker. The same things that cause growth in large part are also associated with delayed onset muscle soreness. I have a long fucking list and we're going to go through it. It would be really weird if all of this was a coincidence. Ready? Let's get started. Shit. It's a list. Increasing a program's volume. When you have a volume increase with your clients, what do they start complaining about? That they're not as sore? No. That they are more sore. What does increasing volume also associated with in basically every study ever done? An increase in hypertrophic outcomes. Volume and hypertrophy are very well related on a dose-response scale. Is there a limit to that? Yes, we'll get to that in the next slide. But more volume usually equals more gains, and more volume makes you more sore. Strange how that works. Increasing intensity. Lift heavier weights than you've ever done before, you will get more of a risk of delayed onset muscle soreness. Also, heavier weights tend to hypertrophy you more. Another really awful coincidence. Compound heavy basics, squats, bench press, deadlifts, pull-ups, rows are notorious for fucking you up and making you super sore. Right? Most of us, if I gave you a bench press, just a barbell, versus a chest press machine, you know, the ones that glide really well, which one do you get more sore from using? You look at the barbell like, fuck, I already feel an effect from that shit, right? And barbells and stuff are known to most people ecologically, to most lifters, to have this profound respect given to them because they promote growth so well. Like, big bodybuilders look at a guy's legs and be like, you probably squat off the ground. I'd be like, yeah, I squat all the time. Nobody's like, oh, you move a lot of leg extensions with your shit pointing in and out and all those fucking angles. Like, yeah, that's how I got a huge quad, right? So, compound basics, notorious for growth, notorious for causing DOMs. Exercise deletion and replacement, which is another way of saying exercise variation between mesocycles. When you put it into an exercise you haven't done for a while, it makes you more sore. Okay, this is also called novelty, right? Training novelty. Some of the same individuals that ruthlessly, and it's good for them that they do that, debate me about DOMs being associated, or soreness or damage being associated with growth. We'll also look at a study in which individuals who did some exercise or some training frequency versus another got growth. And they'll say, well, couldn't the growth just be from the novel stimulus? Well, not a second. I thought you said that novel stimuli had nothing to do with growth, and just doing the same basic shit over and over and slowly progressing on it was the way to grow. I've never actually called anyone out on this. This is my first time saying this in public. I'm not have to call people out on Facebook anymore. It's not nice. So it's confusing because they'll say novelty causes growth, so you got to obviate for novelty and you're looking at studies. But when you look at saying, hey, so if I do squats for a while, if I switch in leg presses, I get really fucked up and sore, aren't I growing more? They go, nope, you're growing less now. But I thought novelty was a good thing. It's weird, right? So it's the hilariousness of social media contradiction on this point. The very same people that say damage has nothing to do with growth, that it's all about slow progressions, and they say that, switching exercises in and out, it shouldn't occur very often or ever or something, also say that novelty is something that can explain things where we think it's magic variables. So you'll take individuals that train for 2 times a week and they'll give them a 3-time-a-week program and they'll grow more. Same individuals will say, but isn't the novelty possibly to explain that? But hold on, the novelty does cause more growth or it doesn't? That makes sense? We've got to figure out what we think about these things. But we know for a fact exercise deletion and replacement, if you choose novel exercises, you will get more damage, and everyone says you grow more from it, and there are some studies to confirm that, and almost every high-level athlete alters their exercises every now and again. Nobody got big doing the same shit all the time. Next one, metabolite sequestration, or any other thing you want to call it, high metabolite load, which has also been done with KATSU training or occlusion training, right? That has shown to cause hypertrophy. It also causes radical DOMs. You guys ever tried any metabolite training? Or anyone tried any tourniquet training or anything like that? KATSU training? It should fuck you up. You get so sore you can't brush your teeth, you can't touch your face anymore. Holy fuck. I've seen some speculation that there's one study that says that occlusion training doesn't cause damage. It's comical. I've done occlusion training, can't walk for a week. That's not damage, I don't know what the fuck it is, right? So metabolite sequestration causes growth. It's been very well associated with growth now. It also causes a disproportionate level compared to otherwise equated volumes of delayed onset muscle soreness. Again, very strange. EAL, accentuated, what's it called? Accentuated eccentric loading. Eccentric accentuated loading. There's AEL, EAL is the same thing, and people just do it different acronyms. I'm having trouble with. That's when you use more on the eccentric, and then you take off the load, the person does a contraction with more weight, you push more down on the eccentric. That has been associated with higher levels of hypertrophy. It is also associated with higher levels of late onset muscle soreness. And it literally causes more damage. It actually tears your actin myosin heads and stuff like that. That's what it's designed to do. It's cause damage. Right? Anti-inflammatories. How many of you guys are privy to the anti-inflammatory literature? Right? If you take high-dose anti-inflammatories, they prevent the muscle damage cascade from occurring, and they also hamper growth to a significant extent. So if damage had nothing to do with growth, it'd be very strange that anti-inflammatories both limit damage, because they never allow delayed onset muscle soreness to really occur, and they limit growth as well. Very, very strange. And then muscle specificity, and there's another chance to get really awkward on social media. People say, oh man, I did lunges and my glutes are on fire. Can you imagine if you didn't believe in any relationship between damage and growth, what you would say to them in that situation? You're like, oh fuck, you probably got smaller glutes now. What? You mean it's working? Like, no, it's not working. You've got to stop getting sore. If you thought soreness caused poorer results than not soreness, what kind of recommendations would you make for exercise selection and program? Think about it. We can go through it. Decrease your volume, decrease intensity, stay away from heavy basics. Don't ever delete and replace your exercise. You used to do shame shit all the time. Never mess with metabolites. Don't ever accentuate the eccentric. Consume lots of anti-inflammatories at all times, and make sure that whatever muscle is getting sore from training, that's definitely not the one that's growing. It may be any other muscles that are growing, no muscles that are growing, or it has nothing to do with it. That's not logical to you at all? No. So are we supposed to get as fucking sore as possible from training as ever? Nope. And here's why. So there's a counterpoint. First counterpoint. Your maximum adaptive volume is your maximum recoverable volume minus however much disruption is needless because it's just to recover so that you can at least buy some time to grow. So you shouldn't be training all the way to your MRV every time because then you're just fucking yourself up and it's resources you could have spent on adapting that you're now just spending on recovering. Not a good idea. So we don't want to train to balls to the wall all the time. We want to leave some adaptive window so that your body has enough energy, enough sort of systemic capacity to actually make gains, right? So as sore as you could ever get is not where you should train because that is actually going to cost you hypertrophy because the recovery itself is going to interfere with the process of adaptation. That makes sense? We almost never want to go as hard as possible because we want to save something for the adaptive processes, which themselves require some physiological priority and energy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Counterpoint 2, you don't want to elongate the stimulus recovery adaptation curve for no reason just to heal, okay? So for example, if you could train for 10 sets per workout and get sore for 2 or 3 days, you could train every 2 or 3 days. But if you're like, fuck that, I want to get fucked up, super sore, you train for 15 sets. Now you got to wait for 5 days until you get to train again. If we've already established that any training above the optimal gets you just longer recovery, why the fuck are we getting so sore that we can't train all the time? Now you should say, no, it's okay to train sore. Go ahead and provide me an overload while training sore. By the way, I'd like to fucking end that debate right here and right now. People will say, you ask them, is it okay to train sore? It's like the new age, it started like 5 years ago, but evidence-based people are like, yeah, soreness doesn't really matter for anything, so it's okay to train sore. How the fuck are you supposed to overload when you're sore? You guys ever try that shit? First of all, don't try that shit, because that's how you get hurt. You can imagine warming up for squats and being like, oh man, my quads are fucked up. Let's overload, baby. You guys know what overload means? It means more than you're characteristically used to handling. That's how you get hurt. Don't do shit like that, right? If you're still sore when you're supposed to have a hard workout, take an easy workout, then rearrange what you're doing so that you don't get fucking super sore all the time, right? So there's like a weird myopic view that some people take, which is like, soreness doesn't matter, don't try to get sore, but if you're sore, just fucking overload anyway. Don't do that, right? As you get strong, that's going to be a really, 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 really bad idea, right? So if we get too sore chronically, first of all, either we have two choices. Either our training frequency has to fall a ton, and that sucks, or we have to try to overload while sore, which is either impossible or possible under great risk of injury. Terrible idea in both respects. With me so far? So, the likely conclusion I take from this is that a middle-of-the-road soreness is probably, in the muscles that get sore, a good average guide by which to go. But what does that mean? That means when you start your mesocycle, you want to intentionally start closer to your MEV, right? You want to get barely at all sore or not sore, right? That's a good guide. So if you start your week of training, you start your month of training, and you're super fucked up sore, you fucked up, right? You guys know those studies on beginners where while they're really sore in the first couple of weeks, they barely grow? You're one of them now. Congratulations. First week in the shitter. First week you're not supposed to, I'll get to you in just a sec. First week you're not supposed to get super fucked up. You should be barely feeling it. But guess what? You got a huge window to open shit up into, right? So next week you go up in volume, up in RER, up in whatever you were doing. You increase the stimulus, and you want to finish the mesocycle very sore, because after that you have functionally overreached yourself and you have a whole deload week to recover from that. And there is probably a good reason to really functionally overreach at least maybe once a mesocycle to get those benefits, which are probably a good idea. But that's the only time you want to get really fucked up, is at the end of the mesocycle. That means on average, you're getting either about the same level of soreness, just barely, or a little bit more soreness as you go on every session through the mesocycle, all right? So your average soreness, that's a good soreness to train, is like what I call like a twinge, right? Like 2 to 3 days, and then you're healed, and then you're ready to fucking hit it again. Does that make sense? If you're more advanced, you might have to get more sore to do the work that it takes. If you're more of a beginner, you might not ever get sore at all and just fucking train 4 days a week and you can get awesome fucking gains, but on average, just a bit sore is probably great. If you're not sore at all, so I think I have a point here for that, some muscles don't get sore based on their design construction, and that's okay. A lot of them you can slam with more volume and see if you're really hitting your MRV. So if you say, well, my side delts don't ever get sore, how many fucking sets of side delts you do per week? Like, well, 10 sets on a Monday and that's it. Well, fucking slam them with 30 and see how that goes, right? You might get a little bit sore and you might also grow a ton. It might just be that you're not doing it. But some muscles don't get sore, and that's not a big deal. We don't per se chase soreness, but in the muscles that do get sore, getting a little sore is probably a good thing, right? So the big lesson here is if you avoid soreness entirely, okay, or you don't pay it any mind, you might be undertrained. I mean, how the fuck do you know? I mean, you can calculate MRV on just ability, etc., and that's totally cool. But boy, if you never get sore, good luck in thinking that you're doing as much as it takes to grow. And on the other hand, if you chase DOMs like crazy, you're likely overreaching all the fucking time, and then you're making a really big mistake. Think about it just on a logical perspective. People will say, yeah, man, and you hear this all the time. First week of my program, I get super sore, but then I get used to it. I don't get sore anymore. Is that how adaptive systems work? You're supposed to put a big shit at the front end and just let it peter out to dip? Is that how you run races? Like, yeah, man, I sprinted the first half of my marathon, and then I crawled the last half. Sweet. That's not a good idea, right? You want at least consistent performance, and probably, because of the principle of overload, you want more and more and more until your fatigue is too high, and then you take a deload, and then you restart that process. Does that make sense? So the first week of training, and this comes down to anti-egotistical training. After your deload, what do you want to do desperately? You want to go in there and Superman that shit. You want a nuclear bomb to your fucking chest, quad, back. You want to train hard because you're full of piss and vinegar, you're full of energy. You have 1 fucking week of deload because you stare at your wall at home, you have nothing better to do. You're like, I want to train. I want to train, right? And then you get in there and you fuck shit up, and it's way too much of an overload. You spend most of that protein turnover recovering versus growing, and you fucked up. And then how the hell are you supposed to present an overload if you went way too far in the first week? I don't know, do double the first day? It doesn't make any sense. So not egotistical training means you come in and that first week, you just do a bit, minimum effective volume, start nice and easy. I know, crazy fucking concept for evidence-based folks, right? You start nice and easy, and the next week, you open it up a bit, and then you open it up a bit, you open it up a bit, and that means the soreness level you're going to be generating is barely there every time. You could up it and get crazy sore. That would be a mistake. You could keep it the same and start pretty sore and then get to no soreness. That would be a mistake. You want to dope it out nice and smooth so that you get sore, just about the same, or maybe increasing a little. And then at the last week, yeah, you want to overreach. That's when it's time to fuck shit up. You have a whole deload, and you can get back to work. Right? That's down to an hypertrophy. Shit, I did that one quick. Do we have like another 10 minutes for questions?
10 minutes for questions. So
10 minutes.
20 to 1 to have lunch then.
Perfect.
Can we clarify a little bit? Because it looks like in these 2 slides we equated DOMs and damage. But DOMs is what we feel as actually the pain. But damage potentially can happen when even I don't feel it. So
with high volume programs, DOMS is secondary immune system caused damage that occurs later. So you get 2 kinds of damage when you train. One is technical damage right there and then, and that actually isn't that much damage. You get much greater damage from the immune system elements, the macrophages and stuff, infiltrating the cellular structure hours and days later. They fuck you up a ton. Anti-inflammatories don't do dick for healing actual damage. They physically can't. There's something has to heal that. But they prevent the immune system from infiltrating and causing a lot of cascades to cause that secondary effect. That is much more damage. It is much more destructive to your ability to train and overload. So if you take a shitload of anti-inflammatories, like if you basically pop 1,000 milligrams of ibuprofen before you train and 1,000 right after, try this at least once. I'm not a doctor in the medical sense. Please don't actually fucking try this. Okay? Try it, do a hard workout, you'll get way less sore than you used to do it. And can you imagine if you thought that soreness was inversely correlated with growth at all times. Oh my fucking god, I can just slam shitloads of Advil and train like a machine. The problem is they've literally shown that decreases hypertrophy. So there's something about that recuperative immune-based process that fucks you up and hypertrophies you in addition to that. The time course of DOMS also follows the time course of the fractional synthetic rate curve pretty fucking well, probably also not coincidentally. So that primary damage usually isn't a big deal. There are training modalities in which you can sum a lot of primary damage. If you do a ton of eccentric overload training or super high intensities for super high volumes, but that's not sustainable training, is arguably it's not even fun to talk about. Like, yeah, if you do like 20 sets of 2 at 90%, you will get not DOMS, you will get, as a joke we call IOMS, instantaneous onset muscle soreness. You'll do that for 2 sessions and you'll end your whole career, so don't do that shit, right? But DOMS, I do roughly equate it to damage here because it's the most profound form of damage that you see. It is the most associated with hypertrophy style training.
At the start, Mike, you mentioned about if you felt sore, obviously take a lighter training day.
Oh,
if you were tracking, yeah, that one, yeah, at the start. If you were tracking RPE, wouldn't you just stay with the RPE? Because obviously it's changing per day.
That's just another way of figuring out if you want light training day or not. Mm-hmm. So if you try to train hard and you're really fucked up, oops, RPE is too high, and you have to lower the RPE and make sure that you're altering your volume intensity as well. Absolutely. Yeah, so RPE is just another way of getting at the question of do I take a lighter day or not? But there's different kinds of RPE. There's RPE target, and there's an RPE plan, and there's like RPE you can adjust and an RPE you just have to hit. So for example, if your coach has an RPE of 8 on Monday and an RPE of 9 on Wednesday, you might not be in the mood for an RPE of 9, and that would be stupid. But some people say, okay, if I'm fucked up, I take an RPE of 7, right? So my question to you is, how are you using the RPE system?
In terms of the latter really scale, so if you set it, let's say you say squats, you've got an RPE of 8, let's say it's 170 kilos, and you go in the second session, that's your same weight again. But obviously, like you said, you take a lighter session because you're tired, you don't think you can hit your numbers. Would you just simply reduce that weight on the bar and stay within that RPE, or would you just reduce the RPE completely?
Either. If the technicalities of which one is better, we could debate for an hour, and I still wouldn't personally know. You have to make it easier in some respect as well, I'll tell you. That's what the principles say, is that you have to somehow, it's got to be easier. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like it either has to be less reps, or less sets, or less weight in the bar, or you push the bar not as fast. Something's got to give.
So
what gives particularly is a very small element of the equation.
So as long as you're just not overloading the issue, basically.
Exactly. What my professor back when I got my PhD, Dr. Stone, likes to say is people just look at one variable at a time and they can still overload even though they think they're not. So a typical light day, back when we were talking about this, would be like, okay, so I normally would do 100 kilos for sets of 5, but I was overreached today and I couldn't do that, so I took a light day or I took a deload. Light day means I do 70 kilos, or let's say I do 50 kilos for sets of 15. It's light in the sense that it's less bar weight, but it's way more disruptive, and it's the stupidest thing you could ever do. So make sure that whatever variables you're manipulating, at the end, a deload or a light session or a recovery session is less fuck you upness, right? Homeostatic disruption is a technical term, but remember that. Like, if you're like, oh, if someone comes up to you after a light session and they're like, how was that? You're like, whoa, that wasn't a fucking light session. It doesn't matter what the fuck kind of variables you're going to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you wouldn't try and match that week's worth of volume. You just simply let that drop.
I would say volume drops are really good place to start, absolutely. Yeah. Because then the purpose is the more fundamental purpose of recovery.
Yeah.
Ideally, you match the volume and go up, but since you can't, if you're too fatigued, yeah, you got to go on, for sure.
Right, cheers, man.
Or just take more drugs, man. Go up all the time. Yeah, you in the back. Right?
When it comes to training volume and you're setting the frequency, what's the importance you give to isolation movements, as you were talking only about compound exercises, so forth?
Oh, I was talking about both.
All right.
Yeah.
Like
same principle.
In terms of percentages, or like from beginners to experienced athletes.
I was talking about body parts, not compound moves. So body parts. So anytime you have a body part, you might do like 3 compounds and 2 isolations. So I would put that in the same. So yeah, but 4 times a week, all the way down to 1 time a week for sure. Yeah. Isolation moves, you can do more frequently because you recover from them better, but they also probably don't cause as much disruption, as much growth. So it's kind of like probably on average mostly cancels out. About the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hi, Mike. Do the rules surrounding pursuing like a moderate soreness apply any differently to people with the sort of one or just a few years experience, given their different recovery capacities, or is the middle ground sort of kind of go for it, but not all the time apply uniformly across all levels of experience?
I think that really, like great beginners probably should, because they want to train really frequently, probably should experience very little soreness whatsoever. I think by necessity, advanced trainees will have to experience more soreness. But I think the bias is really small. It's like this, it's not like that. So I think that for most people between 2 years of training and 10 years of training, that middle of the road soreness is going to be the goal. The thing is, how long it takes you to recover from the middle of the road soreness is going to change pretty radically. So someone who gets pretty sore but is a small beginner can get pretty sore and the next day be not sore at all. So they can train every other day. Someone who gets pretty sore as a more advanced lifter can be pretty sore for 3 fucking days, right? And it's funny enough, people, when they begin pharmacological intervention, they think, oh my God, I'm never going to be sore again, because dumb motherfuckers tell them that shit. That's total bullshit. You get just as sore when you take pharma, but you recover faster. Surprised that that's what it's designed for. Isn't that strange? So you get crazy fucking sore and all the drugs in the world. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be fucked up for 5 days. 2 days later, you're completely healed.
So if you're a beginner with the persistent soreness, you're in some, not trouble, but it's definitely...
You're always kind of a bit twingy because you train so often. Yep. But you should always be like that anyway. Because as your frequencies expand, as you do less frequency, your soreness is also going to take longer to heal. So basically, if you're growing, you should always be either just a little sore, just a little tight, or training either today or tomorrow. That makes sense? If it's neither, you're probably not a whole lot's going on. For hypertrophy, for strength, you should feel mostly good most of the time. For power, if you ever get sore, you're doing something super fucking wrong.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure, my pleasure. The formality, standing up for a question. The rest of you are uneducated slobs. Me, king of uneducated slobs, I'm a fucking lecturer here. I'm not even standing. Fucking pathetic. Yeah. There you go.
Regarding DOMs at the start of the meso, because of not considering that, if we changed exercises, would you practically have to say, if you squatted the previous meso and you're squatting this one, would you base that soreness off the squat or?
Yeah. So like if you squatted last mesocycle and you're doing the same kind of squat, you can start with more volume because you know it's not going to fuck you up as much. But if you do a new exercise, you have to start with less.
Squat or change from conventional to sumo level. That's actually up because of the how would you gauge that?
Experience, and then using that experience feed forward into the next cycle. So like the last time you did sumo after not doing sumo for 3 months, you got fucked up for days. This time, don't do 4 sets like you planned, do 2. And remember, here's the cool thing, folks.
So you still aim for not as much soreness?
Correct. So if you err on the side of too much on the first week, you've kind of fucked up your progression a little bit because you overloaded too soon. You didn't get much result out of that because most of it was just to recover, not even to grow. And then what do you fucking do next week? If you got to do even more than that, well, let's say you got to do less than that, right? Because you're not going to recover, but now you have an overload problem. Or historically, your body's used to more. It's not going to get you to grow much. But if you start a little too easy, you're probably at least higher than your minimum effective volume, so you gain something, but you can always ramp it up. It's much easier to go from 2 sets on week 1 to 4 sets on week 2 where you felt nothing from 2 sets versus going from 4 sets on week 1 and being like, fuck, I totally fucked up, to going to 2 sets on week 2. One of those does not violate the overload principle. One does not. One does. Makes sense. One more question? Or?
Yeah, go for one more.
Okay, you with the question.
You said that you cannot be overloaded. You should, so, like, how much soreness are we talking about? If you just are like mildly sore, would that actually be?
No, you might be able to overload for that, for sure. Okay. And then you're good to go. But remember, every time you're sore at all, you overload, you're risking injury a little bit more than you probably should. Another thing is if you're still sore and you're overloading, what kind of training frequency and volume paradigm are you running? One of those is too high. So if you literally look back over the last month of training and you go, I have been sore 100% of the time, is way too much. You're fucked up and you're probably going to have some chronic scar tissue accumulation or some worse shit. And if you haven't been hurt, it's a big surprise. So on a one-off here and there, if you're just a little sore, can you hit big numbers? Yes. Is it something? So the correct answer to the question is this. If you're just a little sore Can you still do an overload if you have one planned? Yes, with a little asterisk next to it. The asterisk reads at the bottom, but change your shit next time. So if you had 4 sets of high bar squats Monday, and then you go to front squats on Wednesday and you're still twinge sore, like plenty sore, can you overload front squats? Yes. When you get to next Monday, maybe 3 sets of high bar squats. Does that make sense? Change something. You don't want to be regularly sore coming into overloading sessions. Coming into recovery sessions, you can be sore just fine, but not into overloading.
Okay. Yeah, I was really just meaning like mildly sore. So saying
It's a spectrum. Okay. Is it a good idea to be mildly sore when you're overloading? No. Is it a worse idea to be a 6 sore versus a 3? Yes. Is it a worse to be 9? Yes. Ideally, for an overloading session, how sore do you want to be? 0. You come into a big squat workout and fucking massage everything out, you're like, fuck yes. It even has a psychological effect. How many of you guys have ever come in to do a really big workout and you're still sore in that muscle group and you're approaching the bar and you're like, please God, just don't Mr. Potato Head me in this one. Just please let me live. It's a bad deal, right? And so I would say that if the 3 is because that was probably okay, or regularly, not okay. 0. Makes sense. I thought I was already being forceful, so all of a sudden I'm fucking saying 0. Fuck.